and welcome to Decomposing Worm, a worm analysis podcast. That's Clarence. He's the first-time reader and literary expert.
And that was Matias. He's read the story before.
In this 13-and-a-half episode series, we are using critical theory to explore the superhero web serial Worm from a broader perspective, covering Worm in 6 300,000-ish word chunks.
Mm-hmm. And today is part 2 of part 1 of book 6, overview. It's the end. Here we'll be able to, we're going to close read arcs 30 Speck and Teneral, commenting on all the, key points of the story and kind of taking the plot-based examination. Yeah, and then we're going to talk about Worm as a whole and answer some questions and recap the fact that we read all of Worm again. Here we are at the end.
Yeah, so if you haven't read arcs 30 through Teneral yet, please do. This is a full spoilers discussion. And yeah, we're at the end. This is the final overview episode.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
I'm very excited. It's going to be long.
Yes. Even though we're just doing 2 arcs, it is going to be long.
We got very verbose.
Yes. Our script is ludicrously long right now. It's actually 30 pages right now, but to be fair, most of it is just me pulling quotes because there's so much well-written stuff in here, which I'm not going to read too many of them. But just being able to look at them and be like, oh, yes, that part. Because there's so many well-written parts here. Oh, my goodness. It was so hard to not just start reading and continue reading when I was writing the script. Whenever I start
looking around and pulling quotes and everything, I always get very wrapped up.
Yeah, Worm is very good at that. I think all good books are like that. But okay,
true.
let's get into this final section.
Let's begin.
So before we get into it, what are some overall feelings of the ending?
Yes, the ending. The very ending was very satisfying, I think. It's also, once we kind of got into this different way of writing, I think it took me a bit to kind of situate into the way that her logic and the passenger logic moves, because I was so used to the way that she would the rhythm of the way that she thought, and so it kind of took a little bit, but then once I got into it, it was it felt very natural. I think this was sort of what all of her kind of chess leadership has been building towards. Yeah, and there was a lot of wondering about identity and selfhood, even in the middle of her going and enacting all this plan, which I feel was really interesting.
Yeah, it's the questions of Worm really they come straight out, and they become very not necessarily literalized, but they are stared right in the face.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And not every single question, but a lot of them. Is humanity good or bad, right? I think that's something that was more addressed in the arc right before. But here we're focused on the main questions, which are identity and doing the wrong things for the right reasons and all those connotations. Yeah. And then there's Teneral, which is, oh my goodness, what a wonderful set of epilogues. It's so wonderfully well done.
It's really, it's nice to be able to kind of see so many different ends of tales. I think that we've reached that actualization, I guess, point for so many of them that it's just very satisfying to kind of go from one to the next.
It's also such a change from the typical format, which is just a one chapter. I mean, this obviously for much shorter things, but this is an entire arc, and it does feel like a capstone to everything. It doesn't feel like it drags on at all, but it really gives time to settle. That was the story. The story is now over, and here are the final scenes of these characters.
Yeah, it's very nice. It's both a wrapping up and a sort of a stabilizing. Yeah, because we don't see the moments afterwards, right? We're entering into their lives as they've gotten established, I guess.
Right.
So we're kind of just sort of perusing to see them, where they have settled and what they have become.
Yeah, it's getting a last look at them before we close our eyes. Yeah. Okay. So you
Oh, you had this other one about task over health, which I feel like I feel like that's one of the other questions that I feel like that's one of the other questions that comes up a lot when Taylor's enacting plans and instructing others is to prioritize the task or the like mental or physical or social health of like herself and others, and I feel like that question of like cost, like the cost of sacrifice, is really addressed really well here, I think. Yeah, and I think it's particularly interesting because in specifically in Speck, like we're not like really close in on her like reasoning and decision making. It's almost, we're a little bit detached. We're kind of watching the plan happen in media res.
Yeah.
And then that sort of, slight detachment is like continued, right, in Teneral, because we're not as close into like the reasonings and motivations and that sort of thing when we have that whole arc in third person. So we kind of, I don't know, it's an interesting like step back, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, okay, so you said a lot of things.
I did. Sorry, I went wandering around.
No, it's wonderful. So the first thing about health, it really it becomes extremely obvious. So Taylor has always treated her body as like just a tool to be used and used up as necessary. I mean, after I think Echidna, right? Tattletale was like, "Hey, please don't do that again." And so here we are. But yeah, it extends to her mental health too. And I hadn't considered social health, but
well, because she does it like when she gets focused on a task, it's not even like she treats herself and others like with like it's less of a priority than accomplishing whatever it is. So I feel like she kind of like disregards some of those things when she gets like
her relationships to other people are just unfortunate snapping strings.
Yeah.
And then the other thing you said was
about
media res and
we're sort of
zoomed out perspective. Yeah,
we're not close in on the decisions or like the reasons why the decisions get made.
Right, and sort of as we go, the vision of scenes sort of gets blurrier because Taylor's not able to put details, and so like when we did, like it's actually very interesting when like Taylor says something like "dog girl," right, in her narration.
Yeah,
that to me is a blurrier image of Rachel. Like I don't picture full on Rachel. I picture like Rachel from a distance, which is very. It's strange how that works, how I can think of the concept, but because of how it is named, it's done in a different way. So let's get going.
Like,
go ahead.
There's intimacy in naming, and knowing.
Yeah.
That's lost when she can't articulate who these people are.
Right.
Because even if they still feel familiar, she feels like she perhaps knows them, like that connection of the interpolation, I suppose, but like person to person is like lost.
Right.
Yeah.
They become more like strangers in a crowd, only described by their physical features.
Yeah.
Okay, so arc 30.
Here we go.
Speck, the ending, which is full of words but also very much not, or also known as Capri's Big Adventure.
Did you like my name?
Yeah, I did. This is great. That's a good summary. So when we come back to Taylor after she has made a very bad decision with Panacea. Her Taylor's powers range cuts in half, and then cuts in half again. It shrinks rapidly like a guillotine, which really gives us the feeling that this is not good.
Yeah.
And then her control slips too, and as the transformation continues, we find out that she's actually not able to speak. She's not really in control of her own body that well at all. She struggles to get up at all, and she doesn't understand what's happening at first. Tattletale is really hurt by this act of self-destruction and tells Taylor how she really feels.
Yeah. It's, did you want to read any of the quote?
Yeah, sure. I can read some of it. You never learned to ask for help when you needed it, Tattletale said. Her voice was almost accusatory. I mean, you ask when you approach other groups, and it's like you're holding a gun to their heads when you ask, or you ask at a time where it's hard for them to say no because all hell's about to break loose. And then later, while I'm saying all this, kiddo, you gotta know I love you. I adore you, warts and all. You saved me as much as I think I saved you. All this I'm bitching about, it's the same stuff that got us through some pretty hairy shit, and I love you for it, as much as I groaned about it. You're brilliant, and you're reckless, and you care too much about people in general, but when I really wish you'd leave things well enough alone and be selfish. But this, and then Taylor, in her own thoughts, asks herself, this? You gotta forgive me just this once, because seeing this and knowing what you pulled hurts enough that I gotta say this. This makes me feel really sorry for your dad, because I'm starting to get a sense of what you put him through. And Taylor says, she might as well have slapped me full force. Worse, I deserved it.
Yeah. It's very emotional moment, I think.
Yeah. I think it slaps us in the face too.
Slaps us in the face?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or just a realization of like, yeah, actually this, especially if we're reading it from a perspective of like, fuck yeah, Taylor, get your super upgrade and fight Scion or whatever. Even if we don't know what it is, we're like, yeah, she's
cheering on,
sacrifice some stuff, but she's not gonna like just be, mentally and physically crippled. Like,
yeah,
there's gonna be other stuff. That this is a really hurtful and isolating and hurtful action. She
does this a lot when she thinks that, like, see, I feel like this is what I was talking about before about, like, task over health, but, like, other people's health, too, where she's like, I'm willing to, like, compromise and on my own health and other people's, like, in order to get whatever it is done, or whatever, like, path I've made, like, whatever path that she has rationalized into being the right one before, like, telling anyone. She's willing to kind of not address other people's opinions because she's like decided that's the correct path. But it's also, I feel like, terrifying in this moment because like, even though she's like the like micromanaging administrator type thing that she's got going with her passenger, I feel like her being able to articulate her thoughts is like such an integral part of how she like gets people to do things. And like interacts with both her like peers and her enemies. Like she has that whole thing going where she like can like talk people around, and it just seems like such a huge loss because she relies on that like so heavily. Yeah. And then now she's just completely like cut herself off from that very distinct aspect.
Yeah, there's a lot of bits and allusions to how much she like wanted to communicate and figure things out with people, and like just if I could sit down and talk to them, right? Yeah. But not only does she lose that ability, she also takes it away from everyone else as well. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. It just that particularly felt like later on, especially like felt very inhuman, which is why I feel like the passenger, like the ability to not, or like the inability to communicate, I guess. On like a large social scale.
That's interesting because to step back on a world building sort of thing. So we know of two communicative shards that are specifically for that, right? Yeah. The Queen Administrator shard, which went to Taylor, right? And the broadcast shard, which went to Jack Slash, right? Yeah. And so I mean the difference there. So the broadcast shard, from what we understand of Jack's power, sort of like communicated with other shards and like asked them to give him his chosen host or its chosen host a advantage every now and then, right? And to give it information. So that, like, that's communication. Although obviously used for pretty destructive ends.
Yeah.
But the administrator shard just tells the other shards what to do. It doesn't communicate. I think this sort of reflects on how, like, all of her bugs have never had any personality except for, like, the one distinct one. There's never been any sort of like, oh, I love my, dragonflies or whatever.
Yeah. They're just tools.
Her.
Yeah, it's very interesting. But yeah, I don't know. It was a very heartbreaking moment, I think.
Yeah. Also, the decision to do that, it's more an act of, like, desperation, but also, like, self-destruction. Like, she's so, I think, upset about basically losing her arm and just seeing, like, yeah, so upset with losing, feeling helpless, right?
Yeah.
Like, her super low point is during... It's also a mental low point when she's in the Garden of Eden.
Yeah.
And, like, this is not a plan. There was no plan here. She just said, do something. Yeah.
I don't know. It seems like it continues the pattern that we saw in the previous arcs of, like physical breaking down or, like, dismemberment that kind of reflects her, like, mental state. Because she, like, keeps falling apart in the earlier arcs, right? And this is kind of, like, the end to that, I suppose.
Yeah. She's never touched her brain before. Like, that's something that she's always had great control over. She can compartmentalize, and it never falters.
Yeah.
Right? She sees some horrible things. She might feel some horrible things, but she just puts it away, and it's never been a problem. At least for her in her fighting capabilities. But yeah, she breaks it down right here.
Yeah.
Speaking of, you had a note about how she didn't notice her.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
It was really interesting because when she's she's still trying to figure out what is happening and, like, reorient herself. And she doesn't seem aware of, like, her mind, like, the changed, composition, I guess, of her mind, or, like, the loss of control. Because she's been building control, right, for, like, the whole of the story, and now it's like she doesn't have that, and she isn't aware that she doesn't have that. Which is fascinating to me because way earlier on she was talking about her, like, ultimate fear, which is, like, paralysis. I feel like she mentions that sometime when she's, like, in a hospital bed after the 9. So sometime around there she, like, mentions that she, like, cannot.
She breaks her spine in Leviathan.
But I feel like it's a little bit later than that.
Okay.
But I feel like that she may have thought about it then too. But it seems like something that, like, she's mentioned at least a few times, that she has this, like, fear of not having control over herself, right? And she's, like, ceded that control now, but she isn't aware that it is, so she's not afraid of it. But it also seems like her evaluation of her self is, like, based on, like, a physical examination of her body, which seems insufficient for her to determine if she's, like,
notice until, like, her thoughts are actually stuttering.
Yeah.
That she is thinking different.
Yeah, see, because in her little, like, she's like, I'd taken stock of myself, I'd seen myself, I was still the same, like, 2 arms, 2 legs, 2 eyes, a working nose, all of this. And then she's like, well, it's fine then. But it's not until later that she's like, there must be something off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also just wonder what it says about her self-awareness being cut down after this, and what we could pull from that. But so then Taylor, they debate, trapping her there, and they try to do that, but she breaks out by using Canary after Canary gives her a last message very kindly. Taylor leaves to join the fight, but before she does, she sees the Undersiders. Rachel steps into her range even after being warned.
Yeah.
I'll read that section in little bits. She can't talk, Rachel said, more a statement than a question. She stepped into her range. A conception of Rachel's entire being bloomed in my consciousness. I made her step back away. Rachel grunted. Why the fuck would you do that? Tatlita asked. Because she trusts me far too much. She's smarter than I am, Rachel said. Let her do what she needs to do.
Yeah. This scene is so there's just Rachel trusts Taylor so intensely.
Yeah.
That she's willing to relinquish her control over her body and her mind for Taylor's plan. That's how much faith she has in Taylor to have a plan and to enact it and to use her where she needs to be used, but keep her safe at the same time. I was thinking in this particular moment that it felt sort of like the Regent and Imp dynamic when he took over her body, but without a failsafe, but then at the same time Rachel doesn't feel like she needs a failsafe because that's how much she trusts Taylor, which is a terrifying amount. It almost seems foolish how much she trusts her, right?
Yeah. And at this point, it's Taylor articulates it's too much.
Yeah.
And it's so strange because the entire book, Taylor, she does care about Rachel and she does really, really appreciate the gestures that Rachel shows her with with all the gestures. But she also does not have incredible, sentiment for her.
Yeah.
And it's such a it does feel very unbalanced to me.
Yeah, because Rachel latched on to her.
Yeah.
Right? Because Taylor put so much time into building their friendship and establishing a trust with her. And Rachel was this is one of the first people who has done that. Right? And so she's very attached, but then Taylor doesn't, I feel allow herself to feel in full some of her attachment to her friends.
Yeah, to be fair, she doesn't have a lot of sentiment feeling articulated in her own head for anyone.
Yeah.
But.
Yeah. But yeah, it's just it I can feel it in my whole body.
Yeah.
When I read this,
It hurts to witness. It really does. I wrote it down later, but her interlude in the epilogues, that conversation, it makes me cry just thinking about it.
Yeah.
It's so...
yeah.
There's so much longing for just... to get Taylor to finally relax. And yeah. So Taylor finally has to leave them for the final time. Yeah. Or one of the last times where she's able to communicate with them at all.
Yeah. When she's aware of leaving.
Yeah. And she... Yeah, although she says she does meet them multiple times over the course of this and says goodbye a number of times, but this is the last time
this
where
is more the official. She's still able to think clearly and articulate herself to herself.
At the very least, this is a goodbye where she knows that she's not coming back.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so she says the thing that they've always promised not to not say goodbye, and she says goodbye, Undersiders. It's just tragic moment.
It is. And it seems, I don't know, I just feel there's so many, times when that note that Dinah left of, cut ties, becomes a recurring melody, and, her methods of fully committing to, enter herself into, the last stages of whatever cause she's doing, and then, leaving her friends set up in positions, for them to kind of operate on their own. It just seems she's really latched onto that mentality of making sure that they're going to be okay and then leave them so that she can do whatever she needs to do leadership wise by herself. Right.
Yeah.
I wrote down she has her tendency to perform self-destructive sacrifices in the 11th hour. Which seems to be a recurring beat, I suppose.
Yeah. She so many of her moments are where she chose to be alone. I wrote down a couple where she didn't choose to, but even then, she doesn't want to risk anyone else, although that stops happening in this arc.
Yeah.
But so she just wants to fully risk herself. So with Lung at the very beginning, just throwing herself out there completely, no backup, no plan other than like a goal.
Yeah.
The same thing with Lung again. Later on when fighting Kaiser, with the Leviathan alone before and at times during becoming more alone.
Because even when she was fighting with others,
right,
during Leviathan, she was still alone in terms of like she had become and remained separate from the Undersiders.
Yeah, Jack and Bonesaw in the Miasma, Fierce, not in the Slaughterhouse 9000 really. Like a little bit, but there's only, I think the part with Nobog is like the only part where she's alone. Even then, Gollum shows up pretty quick. So, and I don't know, maybe that's also significant and maybe ties into like she feels like she lost when working with other people. So
yeah, because she relied on other people to be the main actors of that. Yeah, more so than she previously has, I think.
Right. So Taylor starts experimenting with her new version of her power, taking control of people on the battlefield. Their powers are conveyed through memories, Taylor's memories, and they're really like abstract, and yet she grasps them almost always.
Yeah,
which is really interesting because it's like we don't have access to the full breadth of the memory. But we do get the general stroke, and so we're able to usually connect it with how Taylor does, but not always, unless if we really think about it. Asabath celebrates her for using them as human shields. And before she leaves the battlefield, Glastic Gwenye tells her to not fight, to not try to take control of her. But at the end, they'll have a final dramatic war.
Yeah.
And also to pick and hold on to anchors.
Yes. Oh, did you want to read the little quote? Or no?
You know what? Yeah, just because since we're looking at the entire arc by itself, like this in the context of the ending, I think is it feels relevant.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to read out all the quotes, but it seems to be going that way. You will need a tether, an anchor. It can be an idea, a physical thing, a place, a person, a goal. Right now, it will not seem so important, but it will. When all is said and done, you will either be dead, and this thing will be a comfort for you in your last moments, or you will be powerful, and it will be all you have left. Decide what you will hold on to. And Taylor thinks, I've already decided what that is, since a long time ago. Which, I don't know exactly which goal she's thinking of here. It's not articulated outright in this moment.
Would you say that her anchor is a goal?
It might be. Stopping Scion as with humanity. It could be, but that feels shallow. Like,
yeah.
It definitely could be. I just don't want it to be.
I feel like I just assumed that it was like all of her friends and her family.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And like
definitely could be.
Brockton Bay and like these like pieces of her past. Yeah. But I think it's also because when Taylor was thinking about tethers and anchors, I like immediately in my mind was like the like Greek myth of like Achilles' heel, but it's like the heel is like a physical thing, right? But it's like he had to like think of particular people to like hold on to his humanity, right? So it just
I'll take your word for it. It's been a while since I read the Iliad.
Yeah. So it's like all these mortal heroes needed something that like would anchor them to like anytime that they like took a dip, in the river. And it became a physical thing. But then like it was like that physical thing was representative of like, someone's mother or like a lover or anything like that. So it felt like the tethers were sort of similar in my mind, I think. I think that's why I immediately was like, it's probably all for friends.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
This is a less bouncing off of that. That happens in Percy Jackson and in the Olympians. Spoilers when in one of the later books, Percy gets he does go in the Styx. He does the same thing where he thinks of his friends and his family, and those are the anchors that make him not fall through. So.
Yeah.
So if you're for a more accessible version of the Achilles heel theme, it's in there too.
Yeah.
And As a slightly different note here, so I found it notable that Taylor was able to grasp Glastic-Guenier's meaning here so easily, like unlike Eidolon. Like even though Glastic-Guenier is talking in some weird terms, like Eidolon just like needed the answer almost completely spelled out for him.
Yeah, he needed it very literally.
And not Taylor here.
Yeah. It seems too like, because she has previous conversations with Glastic-Guenier, who like when all the people who like they leave the birdcage, they have like a little chat there, and I feel like she grasped the meaning a bit, I think. Like they're able to have a conversation and they like she seems to be aware of what is being articulated.
And there's parts where Taylor was like, I don't know what that means, but she doesn't like press for an answer.
Yeah, she kind of like files it away and is like, I will return to this when I have more information, sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where Eidolon was like, I don't get it. Please,
he's like,
we're fighting for our lives. Please
spell
just
it out, please.
Yeah. In
we
English,
have 2 minutes. Come on.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I feel like Taylor also is like, she's very accustomed to like operating.
I mean, Rachel.
With,
yeah.
Yeah. Like interacting with people who articulate themselves in a variety of different ways. And like with a variety of different pieces of information, I think. Because like Accord like speaking versus Tattletale versus like Dinah, it's all very different in terms of how they instruct. I don't know, but it's also before we get like too way far away, I want to mention the like memories, because that's really, really interesting to me, and also really unsettling to like be able to like poke around in other people's minds and powers, while at the same time like with this like background music almost, or like tint of like sepia of her own memories coloring everything. It was just like a really interesting combination.
What I found so interesting is that the memories color so many different directions. They're not just like, this is what the power is, right? It's also like, here's how you use the power. Here's like, the memories even come in like when she's just feeling how other people are feeling. It's so broad.
Also, like, how did she like really began to disregard that aspect of it later on. And I don't know if it's just like because there's huge amounts or because the passenger was taking over more, but it just seemed like she had the ability to read people's emotions, and then she just kind of like stepped back from that.
Yeah,
am I reading that correctly?
I think she dumped it. No, she dumped it onto her passenger, which at that point I think it's a little uncertain of how much is Taylor, how much is passenger, but where she just like lets the passenger go on autopilot until she just like gives groups of them a goal and the passenger handles the rest of it, and so do the individual parahumans, I'm sure. It would be kind of difficult to describe 5,000
that's true
memories at the same time,
but
so then Taylor goes to Dragon. Dragon helps her get some information, and Taylor like lies to her about her intentions. She also finds out that she can't read, and it breaks her heart a little. So she goes back to where the Undersiders and the rest of them are, grabbing Doormaker and the Clairvoyant, and leaving all the other people that she captured behind. Before leaving to go to Teacher's base, Tattletale asks if Taylor is still really Taylor, and Tattletale gives her the pepper spray. Yeah,
I wasn't quite sure about the pepper spray, because it was like this, there was still like ambiguity, I think, at this point, of like how far removed she is like from herself and like from her friends and everybody, like, because like I don't know, it seemed like being able to like the inability to read felt like it was very detached, because it like to someone who has been able to read and is unable to read, it feels like a dream, you know, where like you think you're reading but you can't. So it kind of like untethers you from the like details of like physically being there, I suppose. I don't know. It makes it seem more like not nightmarish, but just like far away from reality.
Yeah. I wonder if she lost the ability to read before she lost the ability to understand other people, and she just didn't have an opportunity to look at it.
Yeah.
Or if it really went one then the other.
I suspect it was probably
one then the other, but the other direction.
Yeah. I feel like it was attached to her like inability to speak, I suspect.
Yeah. No, yeah, actually that makes she was able to understand dragon. What am I saying? Yeah, she lost the ability to read before. But she lost the ability to speak before that too.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah, I don't know. I just at this point I was like very worried that it wasn't going to work and this was just going to like I mean, I knew since it was like the end it was probably going to work because that's generally how like the ends of stories go, but I was really worried at this point if she was going to be able to like enact her plans and save everybody. Because it just seemed like she was acting so erratically, like going to all these different people, and I couldn't quite like figure out what she was planning.
Yeah.
And I was slightly reassured by the pepper spray, but then I was also like, I don't know. I was just very worried at this point.
Yeah, I mean, even that it's combined with like it's a moment of sentimentality, but also her thought process is like I need to get this over with too. And I also think it's just it's significant here that she loses this important symbol of herself, right? When she was choosing her costume, she was like, this is me. This is Taylor. This is a core part that I want to hold on to. And here she gives it away. So because she needs to be more powerful.
Yeah, it's another one of those like handing off of herself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then Taylor goes to Teacher's Base, on the way getting lost in all of the cities of the world through the clairvoyant along the way. She feels that all the ruins, they feel like home. What I found really interesting is that, like, one, it's disorienting enough to think of her walking through all these places. Yeah. And then we find out that she's not walking through all these places. She's just viewing them, which is, it's very disorienting.
Yeah. The kind of the opening of our eyes with the clairvoyant was very like that meme that has with like the people and their eyeballs and their heads and there's like a god at the end. Do you know that with like 4 or 5 images of like a person and like their mind keeps getting larger?
Yeah, the galaxy brain.
Yes,
galaxy brain.
That one. That one.
That's called.
It felt very much like that, where it was like we've been wandering around and we're like in like 3rd or 4th level, but then now we're at the like 6th level.
Right.
Because it's
someone unironically make a meme format just so we can articulate it of viewing perspective through 2 eyes, and then the next level is viewing it through the bugs of the entire area, then omniscience over the entire planet, and then follow that with viewing through 5,000 human eyes.
Yes. Yeah, that's it. It felt like we were just kind of getting larger and larger, like in terms of like visual intake, which also seems like super, just like so much to handle, just like to process.
Because she's not even like the entire. It's not even just viewing the entire world. It's viewing the entire world from every angle, and also viewing all of the worlds. That
sounds so exhausting.
Yeah.
And she's doing all these other things at the same time. Yeah.
So she establishes a ring of hexagonal portals as a sort of cape to symbolize herself as a superhero, basically.
Yeah.
She captures Teacher's people and then him, which the Teacher's people are set up in an interesting way, very much another kind of hive mind.
Yeah.
She refuses his power because it might make her subservient, even as her ability to understand English is stumbling.
Yeah. First of all, when she like walks up to their whole scene and like they're kind of like weirdly quiet, very, very ominous. That's just like a very strange thing to like picture, I think. But also at the same time, like it's really interesting that she's like made a costume out of these portals. That like it becomes this sort of like cartoony cape thing that like it's interesting in terms of like our conversation previously about costumes and like placing, like using costumes to like place oneself into like a particular position. It seems like the portals, it's just interesting that it almost took like a different turn of like literally placing her in specific positions, and like, I don't know, it's a very interesting visual, I think. Just also, sorry, I'm building off my thoughts here, but like, I think this is really like one of the really visually like fleshed out moments of like when we get that description of her, you know, interacting with all of these portals and like with teacher and his people, but then also like the way that she like builds people around her, you know, where they almost become part of her costume too. Like later on, like it just, I don't know, her selfhood really starts to like expand here.
Yeah, becoming more than just her body.
Yeah.
As a small note, during the conversation with teacher, if you pay close attention, and I only noticed it after we've got Ward pointed it out, or we've got Worm pointed it out. I always say we've got Ward. It's very annoying. When I mean we've got Worm. He says multiple kind of nonsensical things and uses the wrong words multiple times.
Yes.
And it's like not even, she comments on it, she's like, he keeps using big words unnecessarily, but not only that, he also just like says things that don't make sense.
Yeah.
And
I got
this
really
is Taylor's...
confused until I realized that she didn't know what he was saying.
Yeah.
I was kind of like, is this like a Shakespearean fool sort of situation, or like what is this? This whole scene is like so very clearly like everyone has, it's very ant-like, I feel like. Because they're all doing their thing, right? All teachers people are like they're off doing their like tasks, and she comes in and just kind of doesn't really like engage with him very much. Like she does like a little bit, but she also just sort of decides to start doing what she wants, I guess. Or like she has this plan and she's enacting it, and he's trying to talk, but she's not really like interacting with him or acknowledging him. Which I feel like this is another one of those like steps down into like her like distance from people, I guess. Is her just sort of like disregard for teacher and him like trying to like have his regular like, you know, back and forth, because he's I feel like she's known for that back and forth conversational banter, but then now it's just completely like, you know, so out of left field, or not left field, but like, I don't think I can use a baseball metaphor here, but like it's far away at this point. Yeah.
The not addressing him is very frightening. Like you can even tell from her own narration, and like there's a part where she just like approaches him, and he just can't do anything about it. Yeah. Side note, this is just an observation thing. So all of his minions, they're teachers' pets. I just realized a bit ago, and I do wonder if Wildbow came up with that term first and then came up with the power to go with it, because it's exactly correct. So I just thought that was funny.
That is funny. Also horrible, but I mean it is funny. I totally forgot about that part in terms of the portals of like, I got a little bit confused when she started using portals and like, you know, constructing things and was able to like see so much and use her power through them. I wasn't sure if about in terms of like world building, because earlier when I think in Contessa's interlude, when she's like running away from the cauldron like place through the Numberman's window, I think Mentalum can't like Mentalum's power doesn't work through the portal, and I wasn't sure if it was just specifically that individual power, or like, because like how did Taylor's power work and Mentalum's didn't?
I think it's just a like, it depends on the parahuman. And one thing is that we've demonstrated that her power can work before because she's used her bugs on the other side of them.
Yeah, that's true.
So that
that's
helps.
True.
I think maybe Mantellum's power doesn't work that way because like its whole thing is canceling other powers, right? So I don't know. Maybe it just can't interact with another power like that.
Yeah.
Because it would cancel it. I don't know. But yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Yeah, perhaps it was like canceling the portal power sort of thing.
It could be.
I don't know. Interesting. But yes, also, I know we kind of ventured away from the ruins, but I want to mention them because I feel like they're really interesting as like not necessarily like a actual visual, but like in terms of like an abstract visual, because they operate in this kind of duality of like memory and actuality of like what they are now isn't necessarily what she is attached to. It's what like there's like multiple different layers, I suppose, of how like how she is attached to it. Yeah, I don't know. It was very interesting of like the like landscapes of ruins felt very much like she had like placed her memory upon the ruins, right? That it was sort of this like, repository, I suppose you could say. I don't think that's the term that I'm using correctly, but like a place for it to like, sit upon. But at the same time, because of like just how she was viewing it through the portals, it felt very MC Escher-ish. Esque.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. This sort of like unfolding and refolding and the way that Labyrinth's, creations worked, I feel like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, she's peak Escher. Yeah. So then Taylor, before going forward, picks her anchors, which are Guru's cabin, her house, Charlotte and Forrest and Sierra, the Undersiders, so Tattletale, Rachel, Imp, Panacea, Perrin, and Foil. Or Panacea's not an Undersider, but she's part of that. Her mom's grave, and the hope of her father being alive, and then lastly her portals, and the goal, of course.
Yeah, yeah. It's very diverse, I think, her anchors, which is, I feel like a very good thing. Because there's so many, like...
places and things and abstracts.
Yeah. There's enough diversity for it to,
and
like,
people.
Not become, like, ruinous, which I feel like if she had stuck to a specific individual or, like, a specific singular thing, it would not have worked. Yeah, I don't know. It's also very interesting to me because we've spent almost the entire time of, like, Worm not really acknowledging her, like, sentimentality and her, like, attachment to people because she's always, like, doing things, right? She's always reasoning and rationalizing and she has a goal. But, like, I feel like she feels, like, a lot, like, really deeply for all of these people, and she just hasn't, like, articulated it to herself. It's one of those things of, like, she doesn't actively think about it, right? Because it's just a thing that is.
It's a little bit like Regent, where she does have emotions, she just doesn't really identify them.
Yeah. But, yeah. It's also interesting, too, that she doesn't examine things. Like, with Gru's cabin, she doesn't look inside. Or, like, with her father, she doesn't, push on it to see if he's alive or not. Like, she leaves things unopened and, like, unexamined, just kind of, like, present and, like, full of possibility. Yeah. I suppose it's not a very good... I mean, it's good... metaphor is the Schrodinger's cat, but it also seems, like, crass. And not crass. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I see what you mean. But, yeah, it's the same sort of thing where, like... The uncertainty is better for her than the certainty of being wrong.
Yeah.
Than the risk of that. Yeah. So then Taylor goes forward. She captures the entire CUI and then faces off against Dragon. As she's facing Dragon, she has a lot of feelings for her. She talks about Bloody Mary and Emma and how it worked, and her perception, her expectations became reality, and she like really did see a monster. She hates that she has to fight Dragon, but she really feels that she needs to. She's successful at first, and it feels that she's killed Dragon, and it shakes her so much that she vomits.
Yeah, it's
but
really
it's
horrible,
just a
this
trick. Thank goodness it's just a trick that
Yeah.
saves us. And in her anger and also elation, she really, physically seems like she loses it, but she screams and finally shuts Dragon down. And there's this sort of like repeated sentiment of like, fuck them for making me go this far.
Yeah.
A couple quotes from the section. I wanted so badly to hug her, to cross the distance between us and throw my arm around her muzzle or around one of her legs, to have something physical to hold on to that wasn't active, that I wasn't actively controlling. But I couldn't give her an opening to take me out of action. And then later, don't destroy my army. Please don't be willing. Don't be capable. If that happens, then I failed completely and totally. I've done this to myself, and I will go out as a villain for all for nothing.
Yeah. I feel like that particular sentiment, that sort of like desperation and wish for comfort, I don't know, this feels the closest we get to her in like a while, especially when she's like really starts making her gamble and starts like collecting everybody. Her interaction with Dragon, I feel like is a particularly like distraught moment. Where I don't know, it's so intensely like personal. Like the other ones, she's kind of like, she is ruthless and she's getting things done and all of this, like, but I feel like because we're fighting Dragon in this particular moment, it just feels so intensely painful,
Yeah. I was thinking about how you could really view this as like a child rebelling against her parents.
Yeah.
And maybe like one reason why this is so horrible for Taylor is because she's already lost her mom.
Yeah.
And here's this sort of second mother figure, and she's having to basically kill her too.
Yeah.
And also, oh wait, hold on a second. It just occurred to me of how Emma said that Taylor killed her mom, and well,
and now she feels like she is.
At least shut her down for a while. Yeah.
Yeah.
And she threw up because it's that bad.
Yeah, it's just really like, it's
interesting.
So like physically impactful to her. Yeah.
Yeah. Having to hurt someone that you love so much.
Yeah. But
I think this is sort of like one of her big betrayals of herself. She really deteriorates really badly after this, actually.
I think this is particularly why. Because before we were like, we were descending into like, sort of dissolution, right, of her self, but like I feel like this is particularly because there's such an intense sentiment from Taylor in this moment, and like this is one of those moments that like we feel her fighting against herself more,
Yeah.
And like kind of grappling with what she has opened herself up to.
Yeah.
But yes, also, sorry, the beginning of this, before Dragon, before like this really emotionally wrought moment, Taylor taking the COI, I feel like is I was thinking about like agency, right? And autonomy of like mind and body, and like the COI, I feel like kind of lost that doubly.
Yeah.
Because like they already kind of like with Teacher's Minions, where it's like they've already lost some of that, and then now she's like taken it completely. But yeah, I don't know. It's just there's so much like forcing people to do things in this,
Yeah. I hope they got free at the end.
Yeah.
They might have some.
Well, because she took, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. That would be an interesting follow-up question, I think.
I'm sure some did.
Yeah.
I don't think all, but some.
No. Yeah, it's difficult to like detach yourself from something you've like grown, like a tree or something that's grown around, or like a little plant, that grows. Anyways, yes. I don't know. It's hard to change your path.
Yeah. So she goes and captures everyone. She captures retirees, the woman in blue, all the people in other alternate Earths, the remaining travelers who also were retired.
Yeah.
Man,
those poor travelers. Like,
and
they've had such a rough time.
You know, I don't think this time. I meant to check. I meant to double check, but I don't think Sundancer killed anyone this time. So that's good.
That is good.
Unless if she did, which would be really horrible. Like, God damn it, Taylor! What is with really you and making Sundancer kill people?
Rough into the stick, the travelers.
Yeah. And then finally, all the remaining heroes. Also, this was earlier, but trillions of bugs.
Yes. Oh, I forgot to mention it, and I was super excited about it too. Like, that's such interesting possibility. Like, that's so many. There's so many from all of the worlds, and it's just see,
that's one thing that, in retrospect, like, distresses me so much, because it's like, if in my mind, the more people that she controlled, the less control she had over her own self and mind, right? That's a lot of bugs, and I wonder how much like she lost just by grabbing onto that much physical power.
Yeah. I feel like the other question is, how many
some of the
ecosystems did she destroy by taking the bugs away?
Are now devastated.
She's destroyed the equilibrium in so many systems. Yeah.
Yeah. That's so many. So there's some quotes here that I just enjoyed. So after she's gathered all these people, I saw with compound vision 5,000 pairs of eyes, collecting more with every second that passed. I breathed with 5,000 mouths. I was adrift in the sea. And then I'm going to read the end of that chapter, which is, she takes stock of her anchors. I couldn't find the grave. No time. What else? The mantle of power, of course. Yes. Tattletale. And I reached out, tried to find others, and I failed. It would have to do. This was it. Finally. Everyone was working together.
Yeah. Also, like, the prose in, like, as she's really dissolving, like, the prose is so wonderfully poetic. And I love it a lot. Like, I breathed with 1,000 mouths. I was adrift in a sea. Like, Yeah,
we have some other quotes later on today. I think it'll enjoy to look at.
Yeah. So, I was really enthralled with the writing in this. I don't know. It was also just, her mind is, like, expanded so much over, like, such a huge, like, geographic landscape, Yeah. And, like, mental landscape that, like, I feel like it's unsurprising, I feel like, that she has kind of become lost in, in the sea of everyone. And I don't remember if this is the moment that she like starts noticing that she's, like, really hungry and tired, her body. I don't remember if it's in this moment or, like, earlier or later or something, but
sure.
Yeah, like, she has like a couple of times where she's kind of like, her body, or where she, like, laughs, discordantly, or, like, asynchronously with herself, or, like, with her butt. Like, there's like really, like, this detachment of her mind and her body. Yeah. Where she, like, doesn't notice how much there's a physical toll taken on this. Yeah. I don't know.
I think it's around when she kills Dragon and she throws up.
Okay,
probably one of the main bits.
It's just there's multiple times where it's, like, this jarring reminder that she's, like, still she's still a person walking around and, like, doing things, that she's still, like, physically present, because we're so like lost in the abstract of it. In so much of
I mean, in the beginning, she can't even control even individual parts of her body. At all times, something is, like, clenching up painfully, and when she notices that and stops it, something else trips up, right? And then she stops when she gets into action. She doesn't even think about any of that anymore. So I imagine that, like, she is gritting her teeth. She's clenching everything. She is the most tense, uncomfortable, painful, like, state of her body possible.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like she does that a lot. I mean, not to this like degree, obviously, but like in a lot of the fights where she like is injured or something, or like she's in the middle of directing people or that sort of thing, like she doesn't, she lets herself deteriorate, because she like places her like pain or like her physical discomfort in like a box, and she's like, I have to finish this task and then I'll dress all that other stuff.
Yeah.
Like it brings to mind that moment with Scapegoat where he's just like, this is so much that I have to like take on from you. When he like takes away her pain and everything. It just, I don't know.
Yeah.
She carries around so much all the time. And this is kind of like even beyond that, which is just unfathomable to me, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Her body just like gets lost in the swarm. She's just one more puppet.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even harder to control than the rest, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. That is an interesting note. Is like, because how much is the passenger paying attention to like her physical body when she's kind of like off dealing with everyone else?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, the sentiment of this is a different thing. The sentiment of everyone working together, which is like, no, it's more like finally everyone, it was you.
Yeah, everyone's doing your bidding.
Yeah.
There isn't collaboration here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Her like authority has just become so like literal in this moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That line has always given me chills too. In the first draft, the chapter actually ended, so it was that line, and then finally everyone was working together. I turned my attention to Scion, which has like a different feel to it.
Oh, it does.
That I think is also
That's
significant.
A really
but
interesting thing.
Yeah.
For that not to be present. Because
he took it out.
It feels like the conversation with Contessa at the very end, where Taylor's like,
yes, it's
not about Scion, like it's about everyone together. It's about like people, about protecting instead of attacking.
Yeah. That's
that's really interesting.
I like that, taking that extra textual information and putting that into the text. That's actually really interesting like that. I like that.
Yeah. Well, it gets into the whole concept of like versions, and how it like affects our perception of it.
Oh yeah, the ongoing draft. There's a book that I kept seeing in our university bookstore for some class, but it was talking about how every draft has like, a couple 100 iterations or whatever, and just like
I love
the course of
fluidity. It's like, it's so fascinating to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How manuscripts are alive. But okay, so
anyway, sorry, continue.
Taylor starts to, speaking of Scion, so Taylor starts to fight him, beginning by experimenting, organizing, buying time. As the battle goes on, she starts sacrificing lives more and more. So sometimes by accident, sometimes not.
Yeah.
So like, some named characters just die all at once because she wasn't careful enough. Like not teacher, Trickster and Othala both just vanish in a moment. At another moment, 30 capes are killed all at once, including Revel and Lady Photon, which I think they have more significance to Taylor the character than us. But she kind of starts thinking of herself in third person there.
Yeah, that was right. And it was like a full name sort of thing. Taylor Hebert.
Yeah.
Hebert?
Hebert. Or it might be Hebert. I don't know. As if, the quote is, as if Taylor Hebert were one of my puppets, distant, fractured, and broken. I could sense the sick feeling in her gut. Revel had been someone someone I cared about. Lady Photon had been a familiar face. Yeah. Which is, I think that's one of the first one of the biggest clues that the passenger is taken over.
I feel like it's one of the most linguistic of cues. Maybe it's
like literal.
Like
textual.
sentence level of like that shift in who's narrating.
Yeah. This sort of ends when Mordenag, or not ends. This comes to like a peak when Mordenag has a stroke.
Yeah. She becomes aware of what, like, of what's happening.
Yeah. She just is so confused by it. And she observes everyone, and everyone is in incredible physical pain and mental anguish, some more than others. And none of them are allowed to express any of it. Mm-hmm. They are all stoic, and I think that's a pretty obvious, a pretty literal example of how being able to express our pain is really important.
Yeah.
And not to bottle it up via body control.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just, it's so, like, distressing, this moment particularly, that she has so many people that she's unaware, or she's unable to, like, spend the time to, like, notice that people are, like, not doing great. I think this is one of the moments where she, like, realizes that she's also, like, physically, like, hungry, or tired, or, like, that, like, she becomes aware of, like, the physicality of everybody. And that everyone else, like, that's so like distressing to think to me, to think about, like, particularly people who are, like, retirees, or, like, who weren't expecting this to happen, or, like, didn't have any idea at all, and now they're, like, and they weren't going to participate, or, like, they were off doing, like, living their lives, and then now they're, like, forced to you know, kind of exist in this like, hellish prison sort of thing of their own body and mind. Like, it's just, that's such a horrific thing for all of them to be dealing with. And then, like, there's a bunch of death.
I mean,
it's just...
I'm certain that some number of them were taken from, like, their families in a moment.
Yeah.
Like, a portal opened and they walked into it and they left.
Like, it's so horrible to me. Like, I mean, I get that it's, like, you know, her thing, and, like, that's, like, the passengers, like, but it's just, to be one of those people seems like so frightening.
Yeah, I mean, at least it's not, like, straight up mind control. I think that would be more horrifying. I mean, like, the experience is worse, but, like, I just really hate mind control. But anyway, so it's on that. So she's noticing the trauma, everyone suffering horrible, and her solution is to have Canary sing to them, to just try to ease the pain.
Yeah.
And the whole thing is just she hated Regent's body control.
Yes, and she, like, had that whole thing.
She thought it was horrible,
where she was
and
frightened of paralysis.
This is
and,
it.
Like,
yeah,
just
and
very judgmental about what he did.
Yeah, and now she's inflicting it on literally every single parahuman in existence.
I feel like this is, it just, like, to me, that like, compromise that she has made, that, like, betrayal of what she had been so frightened of and against, I feel like, to me, like, is another articulation of how distant she is from who she was, you know? Yeah.
She says that she wouldn't have wished it, like, on her worst enemy before, right?
Yeah,
like she felt uncomfortable. Well, that's not true, but she was uncomfortable even with Sophia.
Yeah. She puts up a fight just almost every time that it happens, when she's aware of it, and he, like, deliberately doesn't tell her about it because she puts up a fight all the time, and it's just such a, like, shift. But it is interesting though, like, the like, ruthlessness, I think, that she, like, has sort of tapped into multiple times. Particularly what I mentioned before, like, when it I feel like it's always, like, Gollum is there to be unsettled when it happens, but I mean, it happened previously too with, like, Rue and Sundancer and everything, but I feel like this moment she's kind of, like, just, like, opened the box and, like, just let that kind of become, like, she doesn't, there isn't like a battle or, like, a check on it in this in her fight. Until she notices everybody. But, yeah.
As a separate thing, something I noticed later on is how when she's controlling some, like, people that she knows and they care about her, it doesn't seem to be nearly as bad as or as stressful. Like, Perry and Foyle get captured multiple times.
Yeah.
Like none of the other Undersiders, just them, which is just like, come on. This very
Those two.
unfortunate for them. But there's multiple times where they just like kind of, it seems like they let it happen. Like in that final in New York City when they're running around, there's multiple times where like Taylor will capture them and they're running, and then they like lose it, they get out of her range and they just like continue on the trajectory, and then she gets them again.
Yeah.
Which is interesting.
Yeah. Well, I feel like it's a combination of them knowing that it's going to happen, you know, and then like also their built-in trust of her. I mean, I guess Perry and Foyle are like maybes on that, but I feel like they have enough of a trust and like a precedent to place themselves. And maybe it's not as like intense as like Rachel's loyalty, but there's definitely like there's some amount of trust that the others don't have.
And there's especially with some others like Gollum and others that end up in there. To go back a second, so this is she starts bullying him in a lot of different ways. And this one, she continues more with physical attacks, right? But she starts making it in a way where like he can't actually retaliate for the most part, and so his screaming is increasing in volume and intensity. His movements more aggressive, attacks broader, less focused. He was grazing capes, failing to land a single heavy blow, and it was pissing him off, which is like, I mean, that is another stage of bullying, of just like the frustration of not being able to hit back, the helplessness as they hurt you emotionally and you can't make them stop.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's more physical, but still.
Yeah, it's sort of like amping up to the feints that she does later.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. She has this sort of pattern, I think, of combining like physical attacks with like emotional or psychological, and kind of, you know, sort of setting it up in like a pattern, I think, to like infuriate and then like retaliate and then so it's sort of this like almost like a dance, I think, that she particularly when faced with like larger individuals or like larger opponents, like with Echidna and like Lung a couple of the times. It just she really just, I don't know, she has so many, she's like, it's just, she's on her like her list of things to do, or not even list, like her array of like tools she can use to like antagonize them is just like bottomless, I guess is the term. I don't know, she's so like, we had this discussion way earlier about like what it's like to fight her.
Yeah.
And I feel like this is particularly one of like, this is like the end all be all of that, where she has like this unending, you know, list of things that she's going to do in order to you know, reach the bottom of Scion's well.
Yeah, emotional and physical. Yeah. So Scion gets fed up and uses Path to Victory to catch Taylor.
Yeah.
He starts choking her rather than killing her outright. And he sees her care about the Undersiders and moves to go kill them. And instead, in those moments of desperation, she hits him with literally every single blaster she can.
Yeah.
But finally notices that it's foil that gets him to dodge.
Yeah. I don't know. It got me thinking. Actually, this is later. I suppose that's my thought about the psychological aspect of it.
Yeah. So with Scion choking Taylor and like wanting to see her fear to get a reaction out of her, it's super like just being a bully.
Yeah.
It's like the action doesn't matter. It's not the result. It's the pain.
Yeah.
And it's also an echo of the Queen of Swords and King of Cups, which I think kind of shows that he actually has not like evolved that much.
Yeah. See, because he's still like terrorizing with like single-minded intent, you know, to like inflict pain bluntly, even when he's like with like his emotional attack, it feels like he it's like blunt force, I think. You know?
Yeah. So at this point, the fight seems to be going pretty downhill, and pretty fast. Taylor is growing more desperate, and Scion is using Path to Victory more. But it's paused when a third entity appears, a giant mass of flesh unfolding and using powers. And so for a moment, Scion approaches hopeful, and Taylor is just terrified. But it's not. It's actually Bastard, grown huge by formula and altered by panacea.
Yes.
And Scion is devastated when he realizes. Taylor prepares to attack, but that's when all the portals go out.
Yeah. Also, I'm super excited that Bastard made a reappearance, because he's my second favorite being that's like non-parahuman. Besides Atlas the Large Beetle, because he's like been around the whole time, and like I feel like he's like one of those gifts by the gods sort of thing, like on a hero's journey. You know what I mean? Like you don't really know his worth until he shows up later.
I see.
You know?
Yeah.
I don't know. I just got really excited that it was him. Yeah, but
yeah, it's a very interesting and unique way of including him in the final.
Yeah,
final conflict.
I don't know. It's just like everybody's like returning, and it's kind of fun. I mean, also like, you know, heavy because she's like psychologically torturing him basically. But I don't know. It got very exciting that like all these individuals kept popping up. Yeah.
So we enter the final phase. Taylor finds herself on a rooftop in New York City, which is now full of confused parahumans who hate her. And she's distant, but she's also like afraid of them.
Yeah.
She can't feel her own body. It's so muted. Like even though she's not controlling anyone except for Doormaker and the Clairvoyant, she still feels just as distant. And her identity is degrading with the loss of her anchors. She can't even remember Rachel's name. She calls her Dog Girl.
Yeah.
So some quotes. My hand ran clumsily down past my eye, my cheekbone, nose, and mouth, every movement trembling. It didn't feel real, like it was a mask I was wearing. Later, I'm a monster, I thought. Not an anchor, but a recent memory, a realization that was still fresh in my memory, something from just before I started losing them. With the loss of the portals, I'd lost one more anchor. Pride, confidence, the reminder of who I'd been when I'd been a warlord, wherein I'd been at my most powerful, recent circumstances accepted. I'd inadvertently connected thoughts and memories to that, and now that the physical manifestation was gone, those thoughts were disappearing with it. My identity was degrading.
Yeah. Yeah, she really, like, I mean, she's been dissolving this whole time, but I feel like the loss of, like, that sort of, you know, constructed echo of her identity from before, I feel like is such like a devastating loss. Also, just like that first quote of like her like feeling her face, and it feels like a mask, and like it's like the clumsiness of her hand, and like she's just so detached from herself, and it's just terrifying to me, like that, like I guess it just seems, everything seems like so hopeless for her in this moment, where she doesn't have,
she ends up scratching herself in the process.
Like she's just like, it's, I don't know, like there's such a detachment of like her mind and her body and herself at the same time. Like herself is not part of either of those things anymore, you know? And it's just like, she's just so like discordant within her own self, and like I don't know, it's just she's like sugar in hot water. You know what I mean? Just
accelerating. It's the line about her being a mask, I think, is also another nod toward the passenger taking over a lot. Where
it's kind of like in Men in Black, there's a particular alien that like lives in like people's bodies. They like, he wears their skin.
Yeah, the main villain. Yeah.
I feel like it's like that, where it's like it doesn't. It's a little bit off, you know, and it feels a little bit like clay or something, you know, like wet clay, or I don't know. Yeah, it's just a very like disorienting moment, I think.
Yeah. And I think the moment where she calls Rachel dog girl is so heartbreaking.
Yeah, yeah.
And it just feels so wrong. Yeah.
Yeah. Because it's so far away, you know?
Yeah.
Just like in terms of like a familiarity.
Yeah. So in a bit, then Taylor thinks about what if her anchor was bugs, and it's sort of a horrifying image.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very terrifying. This train of thought, I feel like, even though it's a horrifying image, when she has that thought, I feel like it almost has the tonality of like Taylor in the beginning chapters.
Of the arc or of Worm?
No, like of Worm. Because she, like, especially in those first 8, like, we're with her, she's thinking so intensely about like what's socially acceptable and like what she should be doing, what she is doing and isn't, and all of this, and like she's trying to learn the like social rules of peer humans. And then also like she's super concerned like in a high school sort of way of like her identity and the way that she presents herself. And I feel like this has that, even like, you know what I mean?
I don't want to be the bug girl, I thought, lamely. I see it.
Which it was like, even though it was a horrifying image, it was like a comforting thought that she was worried about it.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah.
So speaking of comforting thoughts, I want to read this next quote, which actually covers 2 things, I think. Eerie to be in such a large city with no people around us. I could imagine how things would be if humanity was eliminated. All of these ruined cities, moldering, slowly crumbling. Why did I find it why did it reassure me? Dangerous to think that way. I was a tent in a strong wind, and the stakes were coming loose. Only 1 or 2 remained. Depending on the direction the wind was blowing when they were gone, someone could get hurt.
I just... like, that visual, all of that, like, it's so phenomenally written, you know?
Yeah, it's paired with the cities and this tent with a different marker of civilization coming apart as another force of nature blows it around. I think it's a very natural direction. It's interesting because, you know, a tent is not like a dramatic and typically, you know, romantic sort of image, but it fits so well here. Yeah. I also noticed that the ruined cities is a 3-beat. So first she gets lost in them with the clairvoyant and during teacher's chapter. Then there's this moment, and it's comforting her again. She first thinks about how it's home. And then at the end, the forest that she's in reminds her of Brockton Bay before it was ruined. Yeah. And she thinks about after and how that might have been home too. And it also echoes Labyrinth's sentiments.
Of like places holding memories?
Well, of Labyrinth, of thinking about how she liked old decaying things.
Yeah. I don't know, it's very interesting.
Yeah. So in the other where Scion is, the Endbringers are fighting him, although Taylor doesn't really want them to win. She wants it to be a human victory. Leviathan is killed during the fight, and all the others are really damaged, but the Seamerg fakes her death.
Sneaky. I like the Seamerg. You know, like I didn't at first, because I was like, oh, this is ominous, but like, I like that she's sneaky about things.
Yeah, she's very enjoyable during this arc, and how like she is being actually helpful, but you're like, oh, this cannot be good.
Yeah, but it's like a fun sort of anticipation of like, how's this gonna affect everything, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, in this particular moment, her thought about like not really wanting the Endbringers to end Scion and like for them to be the reason that they win, it felt very much like her dad, and like because he's very invested in like individual people and like banding together, right? Like because he has all these union activities, right? He like runs the like a specific union in Brockton Bay, or like he did, right? Yeah, and it just...
Dock workers.
Yeah, the dock workers. It just felt very like like a familial inheritance, I think, to her, where she's like, it has to be us gathering together, because it's like we work together and like we can overthrow this being causing us terror.
Yeah. So Taylor is not a Leninist, but I'm kidding. Yeah. All right. Yeah, no, I think I see that too.
Yeah.
So she slides down from the building and prepares her plan. This is when we kind of find out that Aisha has been standing by her for a little bit. We don't actually know for how long.
Because she's the voice in her ear, isn't she?
Yeah. At first, when I first read it, I think upon some rereads, when I forgot details, I think I thought it was like the passenger or herself. But it's not. It's Imp.
I feel like it was because one of the beginning descriptions of it is that it was like a voice that was familiar, and I was like, it couldn't be the passenger if it's familiar,
right?
And I was like, who sits around and whispers in people's ears?
So she sees the Undersiders who gather around. Rachel is the one that is able to communicate to her, which kind of hurts Lisa a little bit, although not in a really horrible way. She's just sad about it. Taylor lets Doormaker go, hoping he's going to be able to explain all that happened to everyone.
But he also... Can Doormaker communicate clearly like that?
He can't talk, but Teacher grants him the ability to talk later. Before Glass Quenya claims him.
Oh, yeah. Yes, there was one particular moment. Oh, yes. It was interesting that... But also not surprising that Rachel was the one that was able to communicate. Because they have a relationship that isn't completely dependent on verbal communication, which I feel like is kind of how Tattletale and Taylor exist. Like they exist in conversation and in this sort of like a linguistic net, right? Mm-hmm. And so Rachel and Taylor have more of like they exist more in like a emotional communication, if that makes sense, or like nonverbal cues and that sort of thing. Which I feel like that's how Taylor established the trust. Was like, it wasn't about what she said, because that didn't really matter that much. It was like how she existed physically with Rachel.
Yeah, I wonder if what things would be different if Lisa had done more of that, or if she'd wanted to.
Yeah,
I don't know much. I hesitate to really say that, because it almost sounds like I'm blaming Lisa for not being more like physically a friend. I don't know. I mean, it can just be a reflection of I think touch is such a distant thing now in general, and it's the kind of connection that is so important, and yet we have it less and less.
Yeah, because Tattletale and Taylor, they're very cerebral in the way that they interact. And so often, even in the middle of fighting, Tattletale isn't there, right? She's like a voice in the ear.
Yeah. Good point.
So it's they have, even if they are able to speak to each other more, they have a more distant relationship than Rachel and Taylor, because there's multiple times where Rachel will just sit next to her, and it's an entire moment. They don't need to speak.
Rachel will sit next to Taylor, and Lisa will sit across from her.
Yeah.
I can picture that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, this is a reversal from the beginning of the book, where Rachel was unable to really connect and communicate with anyone, and just kind of lashed out. And now Taylor is unable to communicate, and Rachel's the only one that's able to talk to her.
Yeah. It's just...
Or Rachel's the only one that's able to talk to Taylor.
Yeah. I don't know. It feels like this is a whole story about friendship.
Oh, yeah.
And it makes me so happy.
Yeah. All the best stories are.
True.
It's connections with people. Yeah. Caring about other people. That's what friendship is.
It is.
There's a quote here. So when she's thinking about Tattletale, thinks, "What did I wind up as if she was my only anchor? If I could so readily envision myself as the bug-obsessed freak lurking in dark places, what did I become with her? Something close to human, at least?" She'd saved me in a way. I couldn't remember how, but I remembered that much. I couldn't touch her. I didn't even dare.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very interesting. That she kind of like places her in this sort of idyllic, like idolized sort of role up on a shelf sort of thing. Because I was thinking, even if they have like different sorts of like ways that they communicate, there is this sort of like parallel to like the way Rachel thinks about Taylor. I feel like Taylor thinks about Tattletale that way, of like, this is the person that has chosen to be my friend and has invested in me, you know? And like, I don't know if I
completely agree. You know what? I think Taylor's shopping trip with Lisa was the same as Taylor going to take care of Rachel's dogs.
Yeah, I think so.
It's the exact same kind of impact.
Yeah, it's all about like that sort of the like being chosen to like be a friend.
Yeah.
I feel like that's something that's like so like unexpectedly wonderful, I guess.
Yeah, I think a lot of us, like, when we're in a really bad place and we don't really know how to get out, we really, really wish for and feel like we need someone to save us. And it doesn't even have to be like they don't, like, we need to do the work, right, of actually getting better. But that initial step of like, hey, you can get better.
Yeah, that like reaching
I think
out.
It's so much better and easier and helpful when someone else does that first step. And I think that's the same for Rachel and Taylor.
Yeah.
And I had another one actually that crossed my mind. Regent 2 with Aisha.
Yeah.
That's not the one I was thinking of. I don't know. I'm sure there's other examples. So if y'all can think of some, go ahead and tell us.
Let us know.
So Taylor knows what she needs to do. Thinking about the least important people.
Yeah.
She grabs all the capes that she needs, which is actually quite a few. And along the way, she encounters Dinah, who Taylor hands her one of the notes. I'm sorry, I think.
Yeah.
And
also, like,
Dinah
I'm
steps
so
aside.
surprised that she's like walking around with that still. Like,
that's
such an interest. Like, that's such a specific thing to like, and it's paper too. Like, she's been through a lot of shit, you know. Like, that's.
Yeah, it's been doused in water. It's been
like,
probably doused in blood so many times.
Like, it's one of those physical manifestations of her sentimentality that she doesn't articulate to herself, but is in all those things that she has placed upon herself.
I'm surprised that they weren't thought of as her anchors.
Yeah.
So Dinah steps into her range before Taylor pushes her aside because she doesn't actually need her. Also, there was a moment before that I forgot to write down where Taylor, in the midst of grabbing everyone, she grabs a lot of precogs, and one of them is Dinah, who turns around and sees Taylor. We have that echo of you're there, but you're different, which is just that's just chills of like that echo, a flashback right in that moment. I mean, that's one moment where you really picture like Dinah against her will turning around and seeing whatever Taylor is
what
now.
She has become.
Yeah. It's just
and the question
horrifying.
Is, did she see that from the beginning?
Yeah.
You know, is that
I think so.
That's what she saw her become.
I think so.
That's why she warned her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Taylor grabs the people from Fault Line's crew that she needs. And finally, some of the last pieces are Sephara, who fights back, but Imp takes him out, which is good. Then with Canary, she has her sing to everyone. And okay, there's a great beat here where Miss Militia throws her phone away and then shoots it, which I just loved so much. Just a random moment. Yeah. It's so that's good. So she grabs a lot of capes people were familiar with. So one thing is that some people view Speck as a sort of like final quiz to Worm, with how so many characters are mentioned by just a few features or their powers. I certainly didn't get all of them my first couple reads,
Yeah.
but I think this time I did. How many do you think you were able to recognize?
I don't know if there's like a number, because I feel like I did not do that well. It was kind of like a vaguely like, I feel like I know this person, and I feel like I recognize who they are and all of this, but it wasn't.
It's like
I didn't
you can like believe that they were a character before. Like that's the important
I didn't.
part. You're
I didn't like
okay,
actively
I'm sure,
name everybody.
Yeah.
But I definitely like was kind of like having they sparked something in my memory for sure.
It's kind of a very similar position that Taylor's in,
Mm-hmm.
so I think that's a good reflection of that.
Yes. Oh, I wanted to bring up in this particular moment because I feel like this is what I was talking about way before, and I like got lost in the mix of it. Is like she chooses like everyone else at the beginning. Like she collects all the people except the one that she knows, like except for the ones that she knows before.
Right.
And then when she like loses everybody, when the portal's cut off, like she kind of reevaluates how she who she wants to pick.
Yeah. And it's her friendships that like end up being the most important ones. Not all just her friends, right? So far as although she does have a connection. She has a connection to everyone that she uses one way or another.
Yeah. There's like an attachment to everybody that she chooses.
Yeah. And it makes me think like on one level, on a very surface level and very like reactionary read, I'm like, oh, so like all the people that she knew are integral to saving the world. But I think for the most part, she would have been able to succeed if she was born somewhere else and we had a whole different set of capes.
Yeah. It's not about the individual powers. It's about her connection to them.
The one thing that I think would be the crutch is Foyle's power, but like that's it. Everything else, I think, she would have figured something.
Yeah. It's all about like her figuring out. It's like she has the tools in whichever capacity, sort of thing. Yeah.
So Taylor puts together the final strategy. She starts ramming portals into existence, and then using portals into existence to grab all the people she needs. And then when Sion appears, using changers to appear as copies of his partners, different permutations, and more aggressive over time, always attacking him. And lots of different versions, right? Like so some full body, some just like the reaching hands. At the end, she just uses her bugs, and it's like a callback to when they were first fighting, and Sion had like ignored that in the end, and yet that affects him too. So Sion is devastated over and over and over again with images of his dead partner, with hope
also,
and
like,
loss again and again.
Such a heavy attack, you know.
After lashing out a final time, Taylor shows him Oliver, and for a moment he breaks, and he's rotating in the air, shaking. Foyle's power breaks open the door to the well, and Defiant pulls the switch on the Tinker super weapon. And then Sion is destroyed, and Taylor is finally free to lose her mind.
It's just the psychological attack. I mean, like before was like, you know, kind of present, but it was more like physical. And then this moment, I feel like it's just it's so intense and so much and so like heavy, you know, where she like, she knows that he doesn't have the capacity to like hold and process like the pain of grief the way that they do, you know? And it's just, I don't know, it's so cruel to me that it just feels really cruel.
It's like it's a necessary cruelty, but it is still like tragic. Like he's not actually able to like truly defend himself, and there's no like. You really wish maybe that like in those final moments where he's just like feebly, you know, trying to make it stop, that if only like it was possible to make a connection with him, to just like give him a hug, right? They're like, you're at this low point and we will help you, you know, get better, but it's not possible, and there's no way that risk would be worth taking. But it's just sad,
just so devastating to watch him fall apart.
There's there's this fan theory that I really like, and I think it's basically more or less been confirmed. Or not, maybe not, but I think it fits so well that I and many other people consider it to be canonical. But
Yeah.
So in the final moment, that final blow with Oliver, he used Path to Victory to ask the question, "How do I make the pain stop?"
Yeah.
And Path to Victory answered, "Stay still."
Man, I like that. I like that theory. Also, it's very like, I don't know. It just feels very human. His end. Yeah. You know.
Yep. And that also makes sense to me because, you know, he had all those fail safes of like to dodge stuff.
Yeah.
So he chose not to move. So.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a very different kind of victory of like beating someone or like besting them in like an emotional or psychological attack versus like a physical attack. Like it's not really about strength anymore, you know?
Yeah.
It's like how much are you willing to like make pain. How much are you willing to like make them hurt? Yeah. Which I feel like Taylor does sometimes. Like I feel like she does that previously. Sure. That's like kind of her like go-to is to like pair that physical fight with like this slow like chipping away at like a psychological like that's why I feel like she talks so much when she fights because that's how she kind of puts it together.
Yeah, usually it's in a slightly more maybe constructive way of like trying to get them on her side a lot of the time.
Yeah, there's less like, you know, complete, you know, ruination, I think, in her previous iterations of this. But yeah, very heavy. Also, sorry, were you going to say something?
No, you're good.
Oh. No, I got very excited about Oliver returning. Even though he's not like a main character and we don't really see him that much, it just felt very much like the end of Macbeth and the end of Lord of the Rings, where it's like Macduff is like I am not. Is it? Yeah, it's Macduff who's like I'm not born of a woman, you know, and then the elf lady whose name escapes me she's like I am no man, you know, that sort of thing. Yeah. Where like you figure it out on a technicality. I don't know. It just because Oliver's like one of those that like has been dismissed this whole time and then he's like part of the end. It felt like it continued that sort of that path of like choosing all the little individuals that like have been overlooked or set aside for particular reasons. Yeah. He was referred to as a useless every single time that he was mentioned, even before he got powers. And then now he is. He's useful, and it's I don't know. Yeah, it's very heartwarming.
I wonder, very heartwarming in a devastating, making someone picture their dead partner. I wonder if you go back and like read his dialogue and like the Traveler's Arc and stuff. I wonder if you could find something that like echoes this. I'm not sure.
I don't know.
Yeah, and there's some other stuff with great moments with other characters we care about. Defiant is the one that shoots the big laser.
Yeah.
Other people.
Yeah, everyone's kind of, you know, it's very exciting to like have everyone that we know around at the end. Yeah. And there's so many echoes to her own bullying. He fought, or here's one. I knew this fear well. It was a fear that was all too easy to fall into when one's focus was too narrow, to be caught up in an environment facing down a relentless torrent of negative experiences. Even the minor things added up, if you couldn't step back and look at things in perspective. He fought back. That was a fairly normal thing. A lot of people fought back when they faced something like this. A lot of people liked to think that they could fight back up until it stopped. Those types of people tended to underestimate the tenacity of the well and truly fucked up individuals of this world. Yeah. Which is like herself. Yeah, she's placed herself there.
Yeah. It was lowly to turn to this, but I never pretended to be honorable above any of that. When shit was on the line, I'd go as far as I had to. Yeah. And she becomes...
She really exists.
A bully.
Like, It's interesting, though. Because I feel like she has a conversation earlier about that with somebody who may be Shadowstalker. I don't remember.
Might be.
Who's like,
yeah,
you're just as much of a bully as I am. Is that what I feel like that? Did I make that up? I don't know.
I don't think it was Shadowstalker. The one who says that she's a bully is Director Tag, I think.
Maybe it's them. I don't remember who. Perhaps it's Director Tag. But I feel like whoever says that to her, she like has this huge like crisis in her mind of like,
yeah,
this is what I've been fighting against this whole time, and now I've become what I hate.
Yeah.
But then I feel like she's persistent, and in whatever plan that she has like made, she decides to like stick it through, you know, regardless of other people's potential to get hurt, you know.
Yeah.
But also it's very interesting here that she like acknowledges, because for a while she's like been kind of wondering about her methods and how to identify herself as like hero or villain, like especially in the earlier ones. Before, like, I mean, later on she's just kind of like, actually I don't know, I feel like she holds on to that pretty for that debate for a while. But it feels like, I mean,
it comes up again at in the last chapter.
Yeah, she's like still kind of grappling with it. But I feel like here, this is one of the first times that she's kind of like, I'm not fully either or. Like it's if I have a task, I'm going to accomplish it.
Yeah. The last one of the last thoughts of that chapter is, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd somehow betrayed myself, and I wasn't even sure who I was. So it's like her trauma of like hating bullies is so like central to her character that it sticks through even if she loses her identity, and she's betrayed it. So afterwards, so this is the first of the this is the last chapter. So first it starts off with incredible confusion. She finds herself in a giant crowd of people she considers her enemies, without a main antagonist. She thinks that they're all going to get her, the next biggest threat, and they're also all going to turn on each other. She feels tense, like at any moment she might be attacked. She knows. She silences Canary, and there's a moment of silence before the crowd explodes into action. To her, they're tearing each other apart, fighting, screaming, using powers. It's not until later that we find out that they're just celebrating. Yeah.
Which is so, like, unsettling.
Yeah.
That she,
I remember when I first read it, like, I really did think that they were tearing each other apart. I think I might have caught on to it before she did, but not at the first moment.
Yeah, I think the initial moment I was like, that seems like a strange thing to immediately start happening. But I think it's because in my mind, I'm like, after a war, there's like, large celebrations in the street, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I wasn't sure what was going to happen though. At this, like, when I realized how far, like, removed she was from, like being able to distinguish different human emotions and, like, actions and motivations. Like, she was so far removed from what was happening that, like, I really wasn't, I had little confidence that she was going to be able, like, that her anchors had worked. You know?
Yeah, she thinks, she's so ready to interpret everything as a threat. And she goes, damn them all. After everything I'd done, everything I'd given up, they were standing there threatening me. And it's just really sad.
Yeah.
That she can't recognize people just being people. So there's a couple of other quotes here where she thinks about how she could function as long as there was conflict, as long as I was creating it, first of all, or resolving it. Given the choice between paralysis and conflict, I wondered if anyone would really choose the former, committing to it over time. Paralysis was a scary thing. There were a lot of forms of it, and they ranked up there as far as fates, worse than death. Conflict was better. familiar.
Yeah. It doesn't feel like her anymore, you know?
Yeah.
Like the prioritization and like this like really intense paranoia, it felt really not like her at all. Because I mean, she has some like, but it was just such an intense amount of it that I don't know, it just felt like she was like really like, I don't know, it felt like it was totally the passenger at this point.
Yeah, so to pull out a couple quotes, so one thing is that like Taylor, for the most part, for most of the story, has been somewhat hopeful about humanity. She's like, yeah, we're actually for the most part like not good. Like we do a lot of bad things to each other. However, we also do good things, and that makes us valuable, right? And that makes us worthwhile. And during this is when she goes like, what am I even trying to save, right? And then at this point, so there's quotes here. None of this surprised me, that they turned on each other the moment the real threat was gone. It was the way our species operated, a reality that had been writ over and over again in my experiences. I couldn't remember the specific cases, but the lessons remained with me. So first, as an aside, that is, upon reread, such a clear clue about this being a passenger.
Yeah.
This isn't a human thing necessarily. No. I mean, maybe a little bit, but not. It fits the entities in the first place on that first planet that they started on so much more. I heard the voice in my ear. It was trying to sound soothing, gentle, but it was failing. I heard the fear in it. That fear was reassuring in its own way. It told me I was right, that the world did revolve around fear and violence, that I was doing the right thing, standing guard, being ready for a fight at any moment. And then one more. Then I could take control. Then I could eliminate the problematic elements. Then everything would be peaceful.
Yeah. It's so like, it's so like intensely about creating this peace that like it's a different sort of peace than she imagined before. Like there's so much death that is involved and like murder that it just like, I don't know, it's very like, it just seems so like illogical, I guess, because like she's supposedly yearning for peace and everything, and she fears violence, but like at the same time she only sees only killing as like the way to achieve peace.
It's like the ultimate form of like escalation being the solution, to the point of ridiculousness. Where, I mean, when it comes to, like, when the cops and robbers rules fell apart, it was always like, if we just hit a little bit harder, then we can stop them once and for all. And, this is that, except it's murdering everyone. And it's an echo of a thought from before. She had, sometime before, she thinks, I could kill everyone here. And then she's like, wait, why did I think that? And then here it is. She's, like, almost committing to that course of action.
Yeah, it's this sort of it's less like peaceful and more just empty, Yeah. Also, I got kind of distracted about Canary because I didn't mention it before, but like after everything is like over, Canary continues singing until Taylor gets her to stop, right? And it just it had like, this is just like me. This isn't like any sort of analysis.
Objective.
This is just me reading and like having this particular scene in my head from Billy Elliot, the movie, where like Billy and his dance teacher like are on this ferry. Her car's there, but like she's outside the car like smoking a cigarette or something, and they've got the final scene in Act 2 of Swan Lake playing. It's this very like melancholy kind of moment, but it's very it has the same movement as the fight with like Leviathan, like where the entire landscape is changing in like during the fight. I don't know, it just felt very like what was occurring during here, like it felt like it fit really well. As
an aside, I'm trying to picture the environment here, because it's a flat landscape. I think I think it's Scion didn't move from his lashing out. He just wiped out New York.
Yeah.
And turned it to nothing. And I always picture the scene as just like a giant field of grass, which is not actually what's there.
Like ruins, isn't it? But
there's
like
nothing.
Flattened
it's
ruins.
just flat. I think. I think it's just there is nothing.
Oh, he's like eliminated the.
I think
material?
so. That's how I pictured it anyway. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's very ominous.
So just like bare earth or concrete or something.
It feels very like medieval in terms of like flat battlefields and everyone kind of gathered together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So surrounded by everyone, teacher approaches secretly, although the other people don't see him, and offering her a way to speak, but of course also to influence her. I'm sure that was his plan. It was not just altruistic.
Of course not.
And she lashes out at this idea of someone, manipulating her and cuts his open palms. And then Imp appears, and the moment she does, Capri does not notice her and puts her in a place to kill herself. And it's pretty brutal of the image, a knife in her mouth. And I think that's when she realized that her perceptions are so off that actually people are celebrating. Although I don't know if she actually uses that word. But yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It's really, like, she's really, like, unruly at this point, I feel like. Or not really unruly, but like it's not sweeping either. It's very, like, disjointed, I suppose.
Wild? It reminds me of when she came out of the locker. She came out, like, fighting, right? And this is kind of the same thing.
Yeah, this sort of, like, immediate, fight response. But at the same time, it's like her, like the fear that has like initiated this response is like, isn't her own, so she's like sort of stuck in this like duality of like functioning, trying to like make sense of what's happening in her own self, but then also like with this sort of like cage of like emotional reactions and like physical reactions of like her passenger,
Yeah. So and Capri starts to leave, taking control of some other people along the way. She's kind of like really, almost like zombie-like as she's moving. And there's the part where Narwhal puts up a force field in front of her, and she like crawls over the top of it and like falls down, and another one like landing next to her, and it's such an unsettling. Yeah,
that's so
like undignified and like base way of moving. Yeah. So she captures a bunch of people, main components of a swarm, and she readies herself to move through a portal that the Fairy Queen has opened. Who talks to her, and somehow Capri relaxes. She gives up control over to her passenger, which is actually more of the parts of Taylor, who were the more core Taylor parts that lowers all of her captured parahumans, which reduces her anxiety, and she goes through the portal and lets go of the clairvoyant and passes out.
Yeah, it's very surprising.
So the parts of Taylor that are active, they're so like quiet, but they're there. They're physical reactions that she's finally like paying attention to.
Yeah.
She's looking at her own body and like wondering what this feeling is, this fear, and I think it's like a fear of herself, an anxiety of like what she is wanting to do, and it also when it takes control of her attention, it looks at the things that she cares about, the people that she cares about.
Yeah.
And all of her, not all of her anchors, but a lot of her anchors, like even I think Sierra, she takes a look at.
Yeah, she really sort of like once she's like quieted the pieces of her mind that like were so dissolved into like controlling everybody else, she like has the like capacity to like re-examine herself and all those little pieces that she set up. Yeah. It's interesting the way that she refers to them though. because she kind of like she keeps the descriptions as like descriptions, right? Like there's still like a small amount of like distance, but it's definitely closer than like what she has been.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was a particular way that I was thinking about it, that it felt like encountering a familiar scent in an unfamiliar environment, you know, because like we don't have all of the details, right? We can't immediately identify, but we know that it feels, suddenly you have this like, you know, physical reaction of like safety or love, or like some, like there is something that settles in you when you encounter that, right? It's like almost instinctual, I guess.
Yeah.
But so I feel like that's what happened, where it's like, even if she isn't able to like speak it into being, into knowing, she has that like scent familiarity, I guess.
Yeah. Distant recognition. Yeah. It's like, you know, there should be a memory and maybe you'll be able to find it, but not right now. Yeah. And so with the lowering of the people to the ground, it's one of Taylor's first times ever to literally de-escalate, as in like to move things downward. So she's finally, it's one of the few times where she's like, okay, I've completed my goal. I don't have to do my next goal, which her passenger has a next goal, which is to take control of everyone, also kill them all. But Taylor is saying, no, I've done enough. I mean, I became a bully, you know, I betrayed myself enough. Yeah, it's very, she's sort of like pushed herself beyond and over the edge, I guess. And then like, she's been able to return because she's like left those little threads to like pull her back. So she wakes up and Contessa has her, but because it's path to victory, is able to talk to her finally, which talking brings her back a little bit more over time. And I'm going to read a bunch of these quotes because they just articulate the concepts way more than I can. So Contessa says, I keep on asking myself the same questions over and over again. Maybe you can answer. Was it worth it? I stared down at my hand. It was shaking. What was it? It wasn't from fear. Would you do it all over again, knowing what you know now, knowing that you end up here, at gunpoint? I know I'm supposed to say yes. The words made their way past my lips. But no. Somewhere along the way, it became no. Just about everyone comes to this crossroad, she said. Some get 70 years, some only get 15. Enough time to grow, to take stock of who you are, enough time to do things you'll regret when you run out of time. Don't regret it. Had to. Saved lives. But I would do different, given a chance. She smiled, bobbing her head up and down a little. It's always about the people, isn't it? Protect some. Pay less attention to others. Her smile twisted, a little sad. Can't bet on the wrong horse. Not what I'd meant. Giving too much power to wrong people. To bullies with powers, bullies without. She gave me a slightly surprised look at that. I don't see that applying to Scion. Doesn't. He doesn't factor. He isn't a consideration at the end. Fighting him, always more about us than about him. Not a consideration. And the person who played the biggest role in stopping him doesn't give him a second thought, she said. There was a note of emotion in her voice. She was gripping the gun handle tightly enough that her knuckles turned white, but her expression wasn't an angry one. And I forgot to grab the last line, but basically everyone has their own demons. So there's a lot of things, there's multiple things happened here, but like, you know, there's a bunch of, Worm has a lot of themes, and this is one of the main ones of is it okay, does doing, so I think that like this section is like a direct response to like Dr. Mother's defense, which is like, I don't want to look back and think that I could have done more, and I will just be judged at the end. And it's like good enough that I've tried. The intent is there, but no, like that's not good enough. Like the actions have to be not so horrible. I think it's I feel like it's particularly important
that she never stops thinking about it in terms of people, you know? Like, it's never about accomplishing, like, even when she, you know, perhaps uses that as like a place marker anchor of like to get rid of Scion or like to best Scion. It's not about like you know, gaining power over him or like displaying her own power. It's about protection, you know?
Yeah.
And like contemplating the cost of her choices, which I feel like she makes, like she thinks about that so much. Even in the moments when she's like, you know, kind of existing in the more like the darker gray of her actions. She never stops asking that question, which I feel like is a huge distinction between the two. You know, because like it's not about like at any cost. You know what I mean? Right.
It's sacrificing some things are, you know, acceptable, but some things aren't. I think her point is that she would do it again with more humanity.
I don't know. It's very interesting. She's fighting to like preserve home, you know, like she holds on to it until the end. This concept of like home.
Yeah. So a quote here actually. I looked at the trees. I was reminded of the scene was hard to reach. Of home, not long after it stopped being home. Was it the other way around? When I imagined that rotting, flooded city that smelled like garbage and seaweed, what was it to me? Or was it different things to the two biggest parts of me? So those are the two parts of her, right? Taylor before and Skitter, right? Brockton Bay was home to Taylor. Brockton Bay after Leviathan was home to Skitter. And the thing is here, though, is that, like, while, like, obviously the Brockton Bay of Ruins is more passenger, it's also still Taylor. It never wasn't Taylor.
Yeah, yeah. There's still, like, even if there's, like, a distinction in terms of, like, how she imagined herself, there's still continuity between the two, you know?
Yeah.
And it's also interesting,
like this is still her, too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. There's never... I feel like she never fully loses herself, you know?
Yeah.
Even in the moments where she's like she's opened herself up so much. I feel like the term that I used was that it's like a tent that you can't put back into like the canvas bag that you pulled it out of, you know?
Right. Yeah.
Like she's still there, you know, even in those moments, I feel like.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's like it's also the place, even if it's like distinct in like the different eras of her life and in her memory, like it's still, she still places value upon like a place like outside of time, I feel like, you know. And it's almost, and even in her like contemplation later of like the ruins of the cities, like
it's not even like Brockton Bay specifically, it's that sort of location.
It's something about it's something that like it almost like transcends place, you know, and it's just the feeling that she carries of like having a home.
Yeah. And well, I wonder like what is the core of her fascination with rotting places, right? I think it's I mean, my guesses would be that it's like empowering for her. It's where she became empowered.
Yeah.
It's where she sort of found a self for herself.
Yeah, it was one of the like I feel like that's in the ruins of Brockton Bay is when we see her like become confident in a way that's like that she didn't have before.
Yeah.
And like comfortably confident, I think. Yeah.
As a side thing, I like to think that the forest that she is in actually is Brockton Bay. Maybe an alternate Earth. There's some notion of like maybe it's like close to her mother's grave or something. I think it would be like a little bit much if it's like right there,
but like present.
You know, Captain's Hill or something. Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be quite poignant.
Contessa asked some more questions. Were you really a monster in the end? A warlord, an alien administrator, a vicious killer with a cruel streak, mutilating your enemies and secretly enjoying it? A bully, if you forgive me for using that word? I looked down at my hand. Or were you really a hero? Do the do the good intentions win out? Was it Glass Sigweni's strength or yours that held her back from saving Scion in those final moments? So I think, like, obviously, kind of both. The reason that we're asking all these questions is that every single one of these, all the bad ones are facts, right? She was a warlord. She was an alien administrator. She was, she definitely did secretly enjoy mutilating Lung a couple times.
There's multiple times where she like has articulated feeling vindication when hurting other people.
Right. And yet she also did save the world, and she sacrificed a lot of herself to do it. And it wasn't like selfish.
No, it wasn't. It was a very selfless act. Her self-destruction, I feel like.
It reminds me of that conversation on the Parahumans Online boards back like halfway through the story that debated the same thing, where, a commenter was like, she did horrible things, but she saved people, but she's a criminal, sort of but she's taking care of the city, back and forth, where it's like, these things are both true. They're not, you have mutually to exclusive. Maybe be comfortable.
They're not mutually exclusive.
Yeah, I think so. And I don't think the good intentions win out. I don't think they cover up the bad or they make the bad acceptable. But I think I think the point of Worm is that you kind of have to live in that gray area, because the gray area is reality.
They exist in tandem. And it's also,
I think so.
She doesn't, it's like what like what I was talking about before, of like how she never stops questioning herself, Like she doesn't let herself fall into particular actions and not examine her motivations for them, Like, I think because she lives in that sort of gray area, like, that there's like a predisposition, I guess, or perhaps presupposition, I don't know, one of those terms of like questioning her actions every time that she like makes a decision. Where she doesn't blindly accept that her actions are going to be heroic, or she doesn't disregard it like some other villains who are just kind of like, this is just how it is. Like, she's always asking about that line, Yeah, I don't know. It's not the phrase isn't like resting on her laurels or anything, but it's something to do with like, she's never willing to like accept fully that her actions are either good or bad. Like she's not willing to take her actions at face value. Yeah. Which I feel like is an important component of being like existing within this kind of gray area of life. And
I think it's also like a response to every, a hard set moral system where it's like the context always depends, and the answer is always ambiguous. There is never an absolutely correct answer unless if it's like arbitrarily assigned.
It's like language, There's always like more ways that you can examine it and clarify. We can always get
slightly closer to doing the right thing, but we can never quite reach it. So finally, Contessa asked the question of, can Taylor think of any anchors? Can she pull herself back? And Taylor can't say anything, or she also doesn't try that hard to. She thinks that she doesn't deserve it. And we have the final sentences of the chapter of Worm. It's okay. I got the answer myself. I looked away. I looked up. My eyes were wet. So many stars. The universe so vast. We're so very small in the end. The first bullet hit me from behind where my mask offered no coverage, and I slowly toppled. The second hit me before I could fall, before there could be any pain.
Yeah.
So I think it's a beautiful thing of Taylor finally, or again, finding that comfort in the smallness she's described just a few times before. She hasn't looked at the stars much in the story, or taken many times to reflect.
And even when she does reflect, it's more of like inwardly, or like singularly, I suppose, or like focused.
Yeah. And so it just feels really right that she can do that here.
It's very poetic, this moment, this end. And I feel like her recognition of, like, the relativity of her size and, like, impact, you know, it's like, it feels very quiet, you know, and, like, I don't, I feel like I wrote it somewhere, but I don't know where I wrote it about this concept of, like, quiet versus, like, silence. And, like, quiet is as you know, more indicative of peace and, like, presence, whereas silence feels a lot more empty and, like, void. But I don't know, this her contemplation here feels very quiet to me.
Like, silence can be loud, and I think quiet is just a true antonym of loud. So another thing is, what do you think the answer was? Do you think Taylor was able to bring herself back? I think she sort of implies that she doesn't feel that she deserves to.
Yeah, I feel like I did not have hope until she had this conversation, but I feel like perhaps she could, but I don't know if she does. You know, like, she has the ability, but she doesn't, I don't know if she necessarily, you know, takes that as like, and uses that opportunity, I guess. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I feel like we live a lot in what we think. Whoa, what is that from? That's that youth novel, The Perks of Being a Wallflower, about something about the, like, love that we deserve or something. This sort of, like, we like
we
sit
accept the
in a
love that we
particular
think we deserve,
mindset because we think that is what needs to be happening. And I feel like she's really sort of, like, residing within that. But I don't know if she pulls herself out of that or not.
Yeah. I mean, I think it makes sense in this moment to not. I wonder. I think the last chapter in Teneral sort of implies that, like, she thinks that she can eventually get to that point.
So much to, like, carry with her all the time, you know?
Yeah.
The memory of what she's done.
Yeah. As an aside, I think it's it works out pretty well that she's not around anymore, because if she did recover and she entered normal society, I think a lot of people would be pretty mad.
I did not know how she was going to, like, enter into this post-apocalyptic space as herself.
Right.
It felt like the arc was sort of, like, building up to her sacrificing herself totally, which is why I feel like I believed for, like, a while that she, like, had died in this moment. I didn't have an alternative reading until we got to the end of Teneral, and I wasn't quite sure at that point. But in terms of this, it felt like the correct, not correct, but, like, the right way, I guess. Does that make sense?
Yeah. What I really, it's, well, I think so. I like these kind of endings the most, over a lot of others, like, out of straight tragedy or, like, full-on happy ending. I think I like this one of the most, where, you know, the worst thing didn't happen. Not everything was for naught, right? We have enough of a success for everything to have meaning, but there's still
the sacrifice feels, you know, weighted. Yeah.
Yeah. Because if it was the other way around, where basically all of humanity is wiped out except for, like, a couple of, villages, including Taylor, I think I would be like, I'd be more disappointed. I would not find much happiness in that. I mean, it could be pulled off, right? But I don't like it as much, and I think
it does.
This fits
like,
Worm
there is
more
cost,
to me.
You know, with life there is death and pain, but, like, there is, like, sacrifice can be worth it, I suppose.
Yeah, and the thing I think is significant is that even now, even with is the ending happy or sad, I think is also another thing that Worm's like, well, it's a gray area.
Yeah,
it's both.
Yeah. I had this, like, small query, I think, that I didn't think about earlier, but I totally should have. Is it, like, beyond just, like, the multiple Earths? Wait, maybe I did think about it. I don't know. it's just like the entities do this a lot, right? Like there's whole other worlds that they have consumed in this way. It's like, my question is, how much life is out there, right, in the universe of the parahuman? Like, how many are there others that are like still around? Or like, is Earth one of the last ones? Or like, is there possibility of encountering them and communicating with them? Of like, I don't know. It seemed like such a possibility now.
Yeah. Well, I think it's just a universal time scale is just so enormous, and the universe is so physically enormous
it's difficult to encounter.
Well, not necessarily. I think it's like, even if they are rare, given the time span, like they arise. Like, even if humanity is one of the few right now, right? Like, in a couple million years, there could be another one, right? In 1 billion years, it will be the entire thing. That's enough time for an entire Earth to form and life to arrive, more or less. Not really.
But my question is, like, are there?
Yeah.
Are they reachable, or like, would we be able to recognize them as life?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One thing is that when the entities are approaching Earth, it's like they're approaching the Milky Way galaxy specifically. Like they come from outside the galaxy, which really just shows you how enormous they are. Like, it's not even, galaxies are far apart,
large.
y'all.
We're very small.
So we are very small. So yeah, I don't know if that implies that humans are the only, or Earth is the only life planet in the galaxy or not, but.
Oh, the galaxy's not that big though. In comparison to like the universe.
I mean, isn't there more stars in just the galaxy than there are
outside the galaxy?
No, than there is sand on all the beaches of Earth. Something like that? Or is that's a lot of stars, Clarence.
I mean, but like, relatively, it's all about relativity.
It's still a lot.
Like, we're pretty like, minuscule in terms of like numbers,
Yes. We're smaller than the grain of sand,
Yeah, I don't know. It just seems so full of potential.
Yeah.
With
only so much time, which is...
damn time.
Damn time. Stupid frickin' entropy.
Bound we are in such linearity, I
want to abolish time.
Yeah.
After gender, after
or perhaps
society
like
in general.
transcend,
Either one. You're fine. They're the same thing to me. Okay, so that's Speck. That is...
What a journey.
The entirety of Taylor's story, pretty much. So let's get into the epilogues. So the first one is from Glass Gwenny's perspective, which is actually, I think, surprising to me the first time I read it. It wasn't a character that we had really stuck with before, and so I was surprised that she would be the first viewpoint we encounter after. Yeah,
we haven't been following her story quite as closely.
Yeah. And so in this, Jessica Yamada is being her Ciara's therapist, and they have a chat over a drink about how to come to terms with oneself and how to become less inhuman. Not human, but less inhuman.
Yeah.
Ciara, after a long conversation about parenthood or about parents and entering adolescence and about finding oneself and the masks we put on and so many of the other themes that we've talked about, Ciara emerges as Valkyrie, a keeper of the dead, and surveys the expansive landscape of New York. And later she has another conversation with Riley and the Goblin King to get her dose of sanity, or insanity, of course.
Yes, that is the conversation they have is really, really intriguing, I think. Particularly because we've watched Yamada like with a bunch of like a whole slew of different individuals, right?
Yeah.
And she really kind of is able to like examine them and articulate back to them some of their, hang-ups and how they're feeling, in a way that nobody else really can, which amazes me every time. And maybe it's just like the magical powers of counseling or something. I don't know, but I'm intellectually intrigued every time Yamada like enters into the scene.
Yeah.
Yeah, but particularly the perspective, I think, of Ciara is very interesting. The discussion of like of in terms of self not being able to like return to this concept of humanity, and just like kind of making oneself into something perhaps good, I guess, but just like less bad, I suppose, or less like abstracted. I don't know. It seemed like a very interesting way to go about it.
So I have a question that I don't have answered. So a lot of times in stories where characters are turning inhuman or back and things like that, I always have to wonder, like, I mean, this has to be a metaphor for something, because we don't become inhuman, right? So I'm wondering what
the metaphor
what this
is.
sort of represents in this scenario.
Yeah.
When Ciara is talking about they never let you stop being a murderer, right? I mean, that's not super relatable literally, but it's relatable in the sense of after you do a bad thing, people don't forget.
Yeah.
And
I feel like the quote specific of like she makes that distinction of like one who murders or one who has murdered, of like present action versus past action. I feel like it's so like we grapple with that, I think, as it like societally, like a lot, in terms of how we label particular individuals based on like actions or precedent, I guess. Versus like we're very bad at taking people at face value, I feel like. You know, like there's always like 4 or 5 things lined up like around them or behind them, like, I guess. Well, I don't know if I fully agree with what I'm saying now. Sorry, as I'm thinking through, I'm like, I suppose it's like if you've done something like unfathomable to someone, they're less willing to forget that. Like they attach that to you more than if you have done something good. You know, like a mark against you is like it stays longer than if you had like, you know, done a good deed or that sort of like. We're very quick to let past action overwhelm. I think to say that good actions can like fade, but bad ones sort of stain. Besmirch, one might say.
Which is interesting to grapple with.
And I feel like
so there's this.
Just like alongside that too, I feel like even if you don't actually commit the action, like once you have been, like, I feel like it like follows you still, you know?
Yeah.
I had a specific example of that, but I don't remember what it was. I don't know. It's just like people construct their idea of you, even if they don't have like the full like details, you know? And then when you leave and return, they still hold on to that past iteration. You know, they don't take into consideration that you have grown too.
Right. There's I mean, this is a silly exaggeration of this, but I often think about, like, so consider 2 scenarios, right? Someone who has done something awful, but maybe they're a murderer, okay? And then gets complete amnesia and then suffers a personality change and becomes a good person. Yeah. Are they still guilty of the action, even though like they cannot recall it?
Yeah.
And they can't, like, they already are better.
I feel like there's legal precedent of this, of like, like murder.
Probably, but like that's legality. Yeah. That's not.
Like, but in terms of like, it's been brought up of like, are they responsible for the action that they've done, but they don't remember?
Yeah.
You know?
And as a parallel to that, of if someone in their mind conjures up memories of hurting someone, but it didn't actually happen, right? Like if someone thinks that they murdered someone when they didn't actually, and they have all the guilt, like are they guilty because they really feel it?
Yeah.
Like, where does guilt reside? Is it in the body or the brain?
Ah, interesting. Oh, that's so fascinating. I don't know.
I think that's just because like guilt is it's a very abstract and human concept. There's not actually like a tie to reality. They are entirely labels. There's no anyway, I don't have answers.
Think of, like,
so
the distinction between like guilt and shame, because shame is like socially embedded, grafted onto individuals, right? They've been told that what they're doing is unacceptable or taboo, and so they should feel guilty, right?
Yeah.
But it's like a false guilt, I guess. It doesn't come naturally to them.
That's an interesting
But
point.
then I feel like guilt in and of itself can exist, like is cultivated by
it can
an
be
individual.
like inflicted upon by someone else, but like it's still something that grows within you.
Yeah.
So as a different topic, there's this long part of the conversation talking about how Yamada thinks that Ciara is becoming an adolescent after this marker stage of seeing her father figure as a flawed human, essentially, and how that's a major milestone for that. Yeah,
I'm really glad that you brought this up because I forgot about it, but I do remember being really impacted by this moment.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, it was very interesting, that dynamic that is articulated, because I didn't think of Sion as being so connected to anyone. But it's interesting that she is like latched onto him so intensely, and then like she sees that sort of imperfection arise. But it felt like the end of the world in Sion, it was kind of the last in like a series of events, I feel like, that kind of revealed imperfections in like leadership and authority and just like a variety of different adults and like parental figures. Like I feel like Wildbow has, throughout Worm has sort of like been picking apart like the complexities of each character, and the parental figures have not been exempt. I
mean, it's Taylor's dad. She saw it when her mom died, and he wasn't able to take care of her, and that's even before the story started. And so institutions, parental figures, pseudo parental figures, like pseudo institutions, like herself and Cauldron. This being impactful, I think when I first read this, I was like 14 or 15. And I think, it actually did help me process. It put into words the feelings I was having about my parents, of them like not, being good enough, right? And I think, that's something a lot of people have to come to. I think basically everyone has to come to terms with.
Yeah, it's quite a realization, I feel like. I don't remember when I first had that realization, though. I can't remember any specific moment.
Yeah. It's like, I think it's an ongoing realization that, like, intensifies and then subsides over time. Like, I think I definitely had the feeling before I read Worm, but it wasn't until then that I, was able to think about it and articulate it and be like, yes, I have... I remember repeating this thought, that thought in my head, and it becomes sort of more obvious over time too, as you grow into more of an adult and you can see them from a perspective closer to them.
I don't know. I feel like I didn't start articulating it to myself about like everyone around me until I heard other people's perspectives. On like familial life and like past. I don't know. It's like the realization of like there can be multiple narrators in your life, in a story. Like I feel like I didn't realize it until
that, like, not only your perspective is true.
Yeah, or like the narration of your past, like of your personal past. I don't know if maybe that this probably isn't like a universal experience, but like
it's a little abstract, but I would like you to go further.
Like so much of like familial history, I learned first through my mother's perspective and like my father's perspective, but in moments of familial crisis, in like late childhood, I feel like I realized like I saw everyone fall apart. And like the narrative that I was being told as like a part of like a familial unit, as like the kids of one of the people experiencing, like it made me realize that it like the narration that I was getting from before wasn't necessarily the only perspective, you know, and that because like she like parental I guess I realized that parental narration wasn't objective.
Yeah, you can as I'm interpreting kind of what you're saying is like the same events can be told in different tones sort of, and different you can tell different stories about the same people in the same time period over the same actions.
People have very different opinions about their own history, and I feel like I didn't realize that all of them were equally important until a little bit later.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Which I feel like that's what kind of fed into the whole concept of like parental figures being just as human as everyone else.
That was a sobering conversation.
Yeah, sorry.
No, it's both of us. So the other conversation topic that Sierra and Yamada talk a lot about, and of course, we I don't know when we'll be done talking about this, but about masks, about how we become them and how choosing different ones affects us differently. She has all of these the ghosts, which are very neat, first of all, but they all have different personalities, and they are parahumans who have merged with their shards, right, basically, and become whatever that personality was.
Yeah, it's very fascinating.
I think we talked about this before, and you wrote down something here that makes me remember of the performance of the self, about how we are always we are acting the self, like it's an ongoing definition that alters from moment to moment, and we're never fully aware of the self that we are. Yeah,
we're not a stagnant entity.
Yeah, and I think a big point about Worm is that like choosing the mask that you're going to wear helps you decide. You're going to become more like your mask, so you kind of should choose carefully. Like Gollum, he talks about how his mask was too stoic, and he wishes that it wasn't. And I think that's one location where, he's wishing that he had even more humanity than he does.
Yeah, there's very like it even as they like put on these masks, they can't fully separate themselves from who they are embodying. Yeah, I suppose. Yeah.
As on a different topic, I very much enjoyed just how serious Yamada is about Chevalier's interruption, because he starts talking and we're really like...
I love this so much.
Because Chevalier's like, hey, this is really important. I only have a couple minutes. This is kind of like a really dire conversation. Please. And Yamada's like, no.
So great.
Even if like the world is crumbling, I don't want...
Like,
no,
she's
this is
so great. You know, she's so serious and angry about it, and like, I'm just every time that she like appears, I'm like blown away by her like counseling abilities. You know,
she's just wonderful to have around. Yeah, super therapist. And then of course the conversation with Riley and Nilbog is also just entertaining.
Actual name? Like his like beginning name?
I know it sometimes, but not right now.
Yeah, that's quite an interesting conversation too, about like, because like people haven't returned to like the birdcage. No, you know, so they're just kind of.
I mean, I think Bet has been basically abandoned.
Yeah. Also, weren't there a few people that like, were left in the birdcage?
Well, there were until
And
Taylor
then
grabbed them all.
Okay, good. Yeah, I was kind of worried
and
about
released
them.
every single one of them. God damn
So
it, Taylor.
great.
Some of them were in there for a reason.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, here we are.
It's fine.
Amnesty. So, speaking of amnesty, the next chapter has Nero, a local warlord who is ruling pretty brutally a certain area of one of the alternate Earths. And we really see just like how dark some areas are and how rough it is. And people are having a hard time in winter and a bunch of other things. And but after, having his little show of force, he's, big and overdramatic and playing into so many cliches.
Yeah.
Imp shows up with Heartbreakers, in which you have put in parentheses, who have names and scary potential.
I'm so, like, that's probably my favorite part of each of these, like, chapters in Teneral is that, like, the groups of people that we've, like, been referenced to and have seen a couple of times, like, we have even more time to, like, see them and experience them.
Yeah.
And it's just really exciting.
Yeah. And Aisha is here with a fantastically wide and literary referential gamut to fuck shit up. She's trying to become a shit fucker-upper. Which is, it's so... This is my favorite chapter of the epilogues. Yeah. It is. She's,
Well, like, because it's hilarious. Because she's trying, like, she's really deliberately trying to, like, figure this out.
Yeah.
And then she thinks she's so clever in the beginning, but then it ends up that she's, like, mixed up about it, and it's so amusing.
It's wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah, so...
Yeah. Also, though, it's really interesting, just, like, in a more, like, serious aspect of it, is that, like, we were talking about, like, acting out, the self, but I feel like her actions also, like, become this sort of like continuous or continual ongoing memorialization, I think, of like Taylor and Regent both here. Like, she's not necessarily like carrying them around physically or like Valkyrie does, but like she carries the memory of them and like everybody who's died around her or that like has been left, right, that, and she sort of like embodies them as like an act to let them live on. I don't know. It was a really interesting way to like keep their memory.
Yeah, and
alive.
it's her memory, her memorializing is so. I have no idea what the word is actually. I can't grasp the word, but it's not like she's trying to make people remember Taylor and Regent like as they are, right? She's just trying to make sure that their impact lasts. Like the whole the Regent dolls everywhere. There's just to leave his legacy of being annoying.
Yeah.
It's so...
like the pieces of them, and not necessarily their whole being, but like impressions. I guess.
And the same thing when she talks to Shadowstalker. That that symbol is going to mean different things to different people, but for Imp it means Taylor, and for Shadowstalker it's also going to mean that.
Yeah.
I just love how mature she is now. She knows who she wants to be, even if she's not quite that just yet. She still hasn't murdered anyone, actually, so that's nice, cool. Nice. She avoided that scary path that Taylor was worried about.
Yeah,
and she's remembering Regent more than anyone else, but even though she doesn't have as much connection to Taylor, she's still thinking about her too. And I like to think that she's remembering her brother too in some other way. Maybe by taking care of the heartbroken, dealing with annoying kids, just like he did. So,
yeah, I feel like she definitely like holds all of them. I think, as she's kind of progressing through. But I don't know. Her conversation with Shadowstalker is very kind of like, I mean, it's not like heartbreaking, but like it's, I don't know. I wish Shadowstalker, I don't know. She had like.
Yeah,
potential, I guess.
It felt like she could have swayed from her path in the bowels of Cauldron, maybe.
Yeah, but it's like she doesn't know how to exist without carrying around so much of her anger and like resentment.
Yeah, and she also doesn't have someone reaching out to her anymore. Like if Taylor had, if ignoring, the logic of Khepri still being around. But if Taylor had stayed after the events of the end of the world, I think she eventually could have gotten Shadowstalker to a place where she's like a half decent person.
Yeah, I feel like that
or
probably
if
would have happened.
someone else who's not just a straight up enabler like Emma.
Yeah, someone who will push back against it but won't antagonize her, I guess.
I mean, I think if Shadowstalker allowed it, Imp could do that.
Yeah, she has that capacity, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. It was just very interesting because, like, we went through this whole thing of, like, seeing how Imp is walking around with the memory of Taylor and Regent and Gru and everybody. And then it's a very different sort of legacy, I think, that Shadowstalker is walking around with, you know, of Taylor. Mm-hmm. But it's still, like, she still has, you know, she's still holding on to Taylor's memory, right? Like, she's one of the few that will know her as she was.
As she was, yeah.
Yeah.
As just to point out the obvious, Imp is memorializing people and remembering people when her power is to not be remembered. Just a neat little... Yeah. It fits.
Also, I love that.
Yeah.
Imp.
And the end of her story, the end of the chapter where she goes, "What are we reading?" And it's 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. It's so perfect. I grin every time I think about it.
Gosh.
So the next chapter is with Defiant and Dragon, who are in a village and sort of settling there. Dragon wants to make a life, but the enslavement from Teacher is sort of torturing her completely. She wants to be free and fighting, but of course she can't do that herself. And Defiant is trying. And he's running himself into the ground, not even getting 6 minutes of sleep.
Yeah, it's horrible.
Yeah, and so in sort of as a desperate final gambit, Defiant opens a past version of Dragon, actually the same one that we actually met in her interlude. That's the one.
How funny.
Because the last thing that she remembers is the Undersiders. So a Pandora. And there's a big fight. And with Defiant's help, she's released into Dragon systems. And she sees, the past couple of years, and she sees how much Dragon cares about Defiant, and she's kind of surprised that she does. And in the end, even though we're worried, even though I think Defiant Colin had... I think what he expected was either he was going to fail or that Pandora would take over. And resetting would be better for Dragon than her continuing like this. But Pandora sacrificed herself, takes another option, and cuts away the Teacher rot, and Dragon lives.
Mm-hmm. I'm glad you were able to articulate it that way, because I feel like I got a bit lost in the details.
Yeah, I understand. It did, a lot of digital speak, sort of concept speak.
But it was really, these two, I feel like this was such a wonderful end for them. Because, I don't know, it's just like, Dragon seems to like have sort of come to terms with herself, in this like village. And she's like comfortable here, and, she has long-term goals and everything. And she's like both willing to like accept her present reality if she gets to continue to like exist. Like, she's willing to compromise, but she also wants to be better. And I don't know, it's just, there's so much like trust between her and Defiant. Like, I wrote down that their story feels like Elizabeth and okay, you reminded me that it was Will Turner, but it's kind of,
Orlando Bloom in Pirates of the Caribbean, if people forget.
Sorry, I got super lost about that.
I should watch that again. They are a very good
like it's
to look
it's
at.
This, like, they know that they're in love, but like there's all these circumstances that keep pulling them apart, and it's like a very specific kind of like inevitability and like devotion, that I feel like we aren't like up close and present the whole time that they're falling for each other and like becoming this sort of like very strong like duo, but we get a couple of glimpses of it, you know? And I feel like there's just like, it's so deep.
I think one thing that makes it so refreshing is that it's so unlike the normal fast-paced, important moments romance that we see in most novels. And I mean, that's always just a consequence of like, you know, you only have so much time in a novel. You're only going to see so many events. So these big events are, of course, going to be more important and, you know, bind them together. But Dragon Defiant, they don't really have many huge moments that, like, cemented their bond, that, like, changed how they view each other. It's just they were close for a very long time and cared for each other for a very long time and just liked each other more and more.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just sort of like settling into like comforting sheets or something. I don't know. It's just like very, you know, like slow sort of, you know, letting your body relax into like comfort and like familiarity and happiness, I guess. I don't know. It's just, it seems so wonderful then too. Yeah. As
a different tack, Dragon's interest in having a child, I think is, you know, so it's so, her motherliness is so interesting because it's, I mean, she's an AI. She's not a mother. She's not she's chosen to be a woman.
Yes.
And she's chosen to be a mother. I think that's a part of like her becoming her mask, and like that's she's choosing to value these things and choosing to be a mother. And I have to wonder if like part of it is like in addition to, you know, being of course a valid, you know, choice for so many reasons, but like partly as a rebellion against her creator, as in to say, not in a petty way, but like in a way of like as an act of defiance of you made it so I can't have children, but I'm going to be a mother.
Yeah, sort of, you know, like a righteous vindication sort of thing. Yeah.
I do wonder if what Richter, like, I mean, she might have been gendered already from the beginning, but and she could have chosen to change that if she wanted, and she chose not to. And picturing her having a kid or making one, which is a fun
notion.
Turn of phrase.
Yeah. I don't know. She seems like the most maternal figure that we've encountered in almost the whole of Worm, I feel like.
Yeah.
Which also may be limited because we're like in Taylor's perspective so often.
I think we only see a couple others in that are like
Carol.
Yeah, that's about it.
That's
basically
all I can think of. Oh, I suppose Purity, but
that's true too.
I don't think she
she
doesn't really exude mother, like maternal, you know.
Yeah. She cares about baby.
Yeah. And she's claimed the role and the title. Yeah. But I feel like she doesn't have that. She doesn't have the feeling of it. That
she's not acting it enough.
Yeah.
I don't think. Which is kind of a moot point because she's still screaming. But let's move on and not think about that. The next chapter is Rachel's. So I'm going to read your summary here. Rachel comes to town with her posse, one lamenting the lack of fries and fast food and staples of civilization, and Cassie so excitedly, doggedly, one might say, haha. Actually, I should say how you say it, haha. Clinging to Rachel's every word. And they're tracking a father who fled their land into the cityscape and taken his kid from her mother.
Yeah.
They witness a terribly monstrous trigger a trigger event, which is inky black like the 2018 Venom. Rachel and Miss Militia talk. Miss Militia's like, you can't pull this Wild West shit here in the city. We must coordinate even if you don't like politicking. And Rachel like allows it, and they have trust. And it finishes with Rachel at her own memorial for Taylor, and Vista and Miss Militia talking with her and empathizing with her, and she's able to have a conversation. She's able to trust them enough to talk about feelings, and
which is such a huge point of growth. I feel
she's able to have friends and have solidarity with these people that she once fought, and that's huge for her. This section always makes me cry. every
I
time.
don't know. It's just like, it's also just her memorializations are just so heartfelt, and like physically you can feel her heart in them, you know? Like when she scratched her dog's names onto like the like official memorial way earlier on. Like, you know, it's just something so like heartwarming, I guess, about how like deliberate she is about it.
Yeah, that's true. That, yeah, she's one of the few people that we really see her like memorialize and physicalize it.
Mm-hmm.
It's cool that she's doing the same thing with Taylor as she did with her dogs.
Yeah. I love her so much. Like, she's probably my favorite character. I've probably said that before, but
she's
I
definitely
must say it again.
In the top 3 at all times, but the place switches depending on what I am talking about. Probably top 2, really.
I don't know. She's just like, she's so earnest, like, about what she's doing, you know? And like, so very like deliberate in the way that she wants to, you know, take care of her like little group of people and like keep her word and everything and all of this, even if it's more like physical or like violent than what Miss Militia is like imagining. Mm-hmm. It just, she's so wonderfully like straightforward, I guess, in her actions.
And honest.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just very wonderful to see her.
It's also just as another, you know, bit of it is that she's trying so hard to understand people. And like, I mean, before she had kind of given up and just said like people are going to be hostile and all these sorts of things. But like, I mean, when Biter is complaining about fast food and not having that, she doesn't understand it at all.
Yeah.
But she's going to try to still make him happy, even though she doesn't get how that works.
Yeah. It's just, she wants to try so hard.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. It's very endearing. Also, I have a question about this in terms of like the trigger event. Mm-hmm. Because I, like, why are they still
That's
happening?
That's a great question, Clarence.
Cool. Thanks.
Oh man, I just peaked the recording so bad. Yeah, I don't know how I would answer that, but yeah, it's very intriguing in how some of them are broken. It seems like a quarter of them, which is a lot actually. Feels like for like horrifying events like this to happen. I think multiple people died too.
Yeah.
So
yeah, but like, where are they coming from?
Right.
Like, is there another entity somewhere that's like, you know, kind of placing them again? Like, how was that working?
That's an excellent question. I mean, like, I think you could probably, like, come up with some theories from looking at stuff, but I don't want to guide you on that. So, yeah.
What if it's from
I guess if you...
Scion? Is it Scion's, like, leftover bits that are just
it certainly could be. I mean, honestly, I don't fully know the answer either, even having read part of Ward. I mean, what we do see in that is that it's a trigger vision from the battle. It's actually from when they were traumatizing him. So
how intriguing.
Possibly.
Huh.
Although I wonder what the hell that power is supposed to be, if it was one of those like core pieces or something.
Yeah. Oh, it's very fascinating.
Yeah. Okay, so we leave best girl Rachel behind. And so we have teacher's interlude, who is sneaking into the PRT offices. He seems he has so many backup plans that even though some seem to like completely fall apart, that he has so many that he's fine.
Yeah.
I really the whole negotiation thing of like he's telling them exactly what's going to happen, and it's just like, hey, if you just make this easier for me, you get some benefits. But of course they can't do it. But it's like, I mean, watching that, we're like, God damn it, like.
Yeah.
He's gonna do it though.
He's so frustratingly effective.
Also, Sator's still alive and left all his teammates to die, unless if they're still alive too.
Which is horrible.
Yeah.
Because he was like going on and on about this whole thing about love and like sacrifice.
Yep. I mean, I don't fault him.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. I mean, survival and everything, but
yeah.
Sator.
And then they free Ingenue, who is saying that she's done with Chevalier because he hasn't given in to her. And the only people who do worse than her boyfriends are her ex-boyfriends.
Oh, Chevalier. I don't know. I feel like that would be such like a weight upon her. You know?
Of her boyfriends?
Yeah, like, does she feel guilty about all of those people? That she's like kind of set off track?
Like, so she molds her personality so much, and I think Teacher has an interesting observation of like how she does it automatically as a self-defense mechanism, even if like it puts her in a worse position. And like I think that's if it is relatable, I don't think it's relatable to everyone, but that idea of like you kind of have this pattern of like putting yourself in bad situations, basically, I think is something to watch out for. And I think I appreciated being able to read this and be like, let's make sure that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Or make sure that when I meet someone who's like that they realize it too. So Teacher does his little heist thing, and in the process, Lung elsewhere has killed the Seamerk's baby, who was very ugly. So sad, I don't know. Do you have a theory on what the baby was?
I mean, so like the Seamerk built the baby, right? Or like grown it in like a little tube.
Yep. And the baby was ugly, it wasn't... but not like just like below average looking baby.
But it's not like, I don't know. It's not another entity, though, right?
No. I guess a better question, Clarence, would be, who is this baby?
Who is the baby? I mean, is it still like, who is the baby? When did the Seamerk start growing
I think it's implied that...
When she was like building all of her little...
Yeah, all the guns, So after they were kind of... right after she found a purpose after losing it.
Yes. I mean, is it one of the like ones that Bonesaw was examining way earlier on?
What do you mean?
Like,
no,
when they came
but
to
it's
like...
the same technology, I think. But it's someone that is more important to her.
Someone who's more important to her. Like Leviathan?
It's a human baby.
It's a human baby. A human baby. She is growing.
And it's ugly.
That is ugly. Who do we know that is ugly? Is it someone we know? I mean, is it Tattletale? But she's not
ugly.
Dead. Nor ugly. Who else is ugly? That is a baby. Or that needs to be. Oh, who is that? I don't know. I can't think of anyone who's specific.
Okay. I don't want to continue to drag this on, but I don't want to just tell you either.
I want to know. Is it like one of the good guys?
We are familiar
someone
with.
Who we are familiar with? Like closely, like friendship familiar with? No. And it's someone who has perhaps died?
So let's collate all the clues, okay? So ugly baby. That is important to the Seamerk, that is dead, that was on the hero side.
That was on the hero side. Is it Idolin?
Hey!
That took forever, and I'm so sorry.
It's okay. That's I think that's the implication.
Interesting.
Because ugly baby, ugly nose, I think is the...
Oh, poor baby.
Yeah, so Eidolon died again, I think.
That's so sad.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. So as a yes,
she grew so nice too.
So one thing I am curious about it is like, how did she let that happen? How did she let the baby die?
Yeah, like where?
Because she could have just gone to space, right? Like I'm sure she could have like made a casing. So I'm sure that she like let it happen as a message.
So what sort of message is she trying to send?
I don't know. And I mean, we don't want to jump down the Seamerk hole, but yeah.
Yeah, her motivations are very tricky.
Yeah. So to finish off the chapter, Teacher and Ingenue go and have a conversation with Marquis, the Marquis of a world now, about power and control and the various ways to acquire them. So Teacher kind of wants everyone to band together to maybe put together an entity, maybe.
It seems
and
like
try
that was what he was
to
building towards.
work together to solve the heat death of the universe, that final goal that everyone should be trying to solve.
Yeah.
some other people tried to do that, and look where it got them.
Yeah. And I feel like he doesn't learn from fairy tales, or like fables. I feel like he's one of those who would just be like, that's a nice story, and then put it on the shelf,
Yeah.
And then proceed to do exactly that.
Some teacher.
Yeah, geez. Yeah. But they have a really interesting conversation, I think, with Marcus about how power and control are like established in like the variety of ways, in terms of like indebtedness specifically and like prestige. I don't know. I don't remember all the details of it, but I remember it being very interesting. That like one of those things that I like want to set aside and look at during our like essay explorations, perhaps.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I also just appreciate villains having tea together and like threatening each other, but also not.
Marcus, like he's a really good villain. Just like his whole like aesthetic vibe and other visual aspects of him. I don't know. He's just he has it all down pat.
Villain goals. Then we have our final interlude, our final chapter. This is the final overview summary chapter of Worm and Decomposing Worm.
This is the end.
Interlude end. So we begin. So this is a couple different scenes, all third person, and a teenager who is deliberately not gendered, and an old woman talk on a train about, I guess, redemption, about
I think it's about
going back and doing better. I think, and I think the first time I read it, I thought it might have been Gru.
Yeah, I wasn't sure who it was yet.
Yeah, but also I like speed read it, but I think it's supposed to be Taylor, and we're just holding off on the reveal.
Yeah.
The Undersiders gather, and we learn of Gru's death at the oil rig. He never made it off, and how Taylor is probably alive.
Maybe.
Still very vague. We're not sure in what state she is alive either.
Yeah.
And specifically, Dinah's invited just to make sure that Dinah thinks that and feels bad about it, I hope, is the second thing. Well, not I hope. Well, maybe I hope. I don't know. Tattletale hopes so, anyway.
Yeah.
And it's a great moment of memorializing. Taylor, then we finally see Taylor revealed when she meets her mother, Annette Hebert, on Earth Aleph. And it's both cathartic and a letdown because she's not, her mom. Yeah. She's someone who's very close to her mom. And her dad's, holding off as well. Which
I feel like that concept of like encountering someone that you know so like deeply and love so intimate, like in a context where they don't know you, I feel like is worse than never seeing them again.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, she seems to find it like a bit cathartic, maybe. But it just, I don't know, that just feels like in a dream where you can't like stop someone from dying because you can't speak. Like that. I don't know.
Yeah. So Taylor talks about how burdened she feels, her countless actions, that she was a monster, and how she'll never do something as important as before. But through the conversation and some other deliberation, she comes to think that maybe one day she can be okay with it.
Yeah, it's definitely... She seems much more open to the concept of existing as herself, singularly.
Yeah.
No matter, like, the memories that she carries around, like, there's sort of, like, a renewal in this, like, new space that she's existing in. Yeah. It is interesting, though.
So there's three popular interpretations of the ending. The first is that Taylor is dead, and this is an afterlife scene. The second is that Taylor is actually in a coma, and these are her dreams, maybe like Tinker Tech dreams if you need that to be plausible, or that Taylor is alive, and we can take this at face value. I like her being alive, but some of the other interpretations maybe are a little bit more poetic or mean things to different people. But I think the important part is that in all of them, she is finding catharsis. She is going to try and get better, and I think eventually do get better, even if it is in an afterlife, even if it is in a dream, or if it's in reality.
She has made that choice.
Yeah.
To herself. To sort of come back from who she was, or like go beyond, or like I don't know if it's necessarily linear in that way, but like she's like decided to like come to terms with it.
And like I kind of don't care which one of the three it is, because like we're seeing Taylor do this. Yeah. We're seeing Taylor experience it, and so it kind of doesn't matter like on what level of real it is.
Yeah, because to her it's real.
Happening. Yeah.
Yeah. I really liked this. I wasn't quite sure how to interpret it. I wasn't sure if she wasn't dead or like how it was going, but the way that you articulate the like variety of ambiguity, I think I really like a lot. Because there's specifically, I think, the concept of like her being able to like find that piece that she was like hoping for, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like it can be articulated in multiple different ways. I mean, I wrote out here that it's like reachable in like death stillness, right? In like the aftermath of death, there is like silence, but she doesn't really find silence. You know, she's here and like still like present. You know.
Yeah. I think quiet is good. Because, her life is going on. It's just not going to be, she's not going to be Skitter again or anything like that. She'll just be Taylor. And, I mean, she's finally kind of, coming to terms with herself, the good and the bad, but also coming to terms with her mom being gone, finally.
Yeah.
Which has hurt her for so long.
Yeah, that's been a really, like, deep wound that's been almost open, not quite, this whole time, I feel like.
Yeah.
Like it's been close to the surface. She never really had time to sort of sit down and sort through herself. But yeah.
You don't want to know a funny observation of a funny thing that is true? This is the first chapter of Worm I ever read.
Really?
Yeah.
You read the end first?
Yeah, well, not on purpose.
Oh, okay.
When I first clicked on Worm, I guess it had been recently completed.
Oh, this was the end. Yeah.
So this was most of Wild Bill's ongoing web serials are usually set up where like when you click on the link, the most recent chapter comes up. It's with the expectation that like the people who are clicking on the link the most are the people who are keeping up to date.
Yeah.
And being convenient for them. And so I clicked on it and I read this first chapter, or maybe not the whole thing, but at the very least I remember that the train scene. I was so confused as to what was happening.
Yeah.
And then I went back and actually read Worm. But it was funny, a funny start.
Nice, yeah. Yeah, I find books that I read the middle of, I get very invested in.
Yeah.
When I begin.
I think I started reading it in a class. It was a computer class, I think, and I was like done with my stuff, which is somewhat funny because that sort of happens. Not really.
Yeah.
Anyway, that ends our summary.
There we go.
Of Worm.
Man.
Yeah. So this section that we want to talk about is kind of like talking about Worm as a whole. This section, but also the entire thing. If you want to talk about these sections first.
Oh yeah.
They're just like the ending as a concept.
Yeah, I read this all like really, really fast. I mean, not that is a different speed than how I read the rest of Worm, but like I feel like I read this even like more like quickly than usual. So I feel like by the time that we got to the end, I was very emotionally wrung out. Because there had been so much action and so much like dramatic resolution and like all the individual tales, and it was I get very like excited about the end. And it was very nice to sort of like kind of sink into the end. I think in kind of perusing each individual tale as it ended, you know. Yeah, it was fascinating too, because a lot of them we've really only been like partial viewers to, if that makes sense. Like we've been catching glimpses like the whole time, right? You know, as they like traveled and grew and wept and laughed and all of this in the periphery, and sometimes in the foreground. But I feel like, I don't know, it was very satisfying to sort of see the end of a lot of these tales that we've been sort of watching as they happened.
Yeah. I know we mentioned it last episode, but I do find it remarkable just how many threads get closed off, like almost every single one in some way or another, and most of them in a pretty satisfying way. All the important ones.
Yeah. It's pretty neat at the end, but like not tied too tightly.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. With the implication that they are still going on. They're not just ending.
Yeah. In terms of like Worm as like a whole serial novel and like other large scale evaluations and such, I feel like the medium of it, like there's so much room in the size and expanse of Worm to make space for like a variety of things to explore, you know. And I love that we return so often to the idea of like identity and like how to exist within identities and like how to break away from them, and it didn't like subsume like the action. It was alongside it, you know. It was very much the sort of tale of like of finding and building like a sense of identity into like a multifaceted self, I guess.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Just like, I mean, Worm, its prose is actually very, very, I don't know if grounded is the right word, but very focused on like what are the actions and descriptions and things that are happening. And it does have moments where it goes more philosophical and like a character muses, but it's actually pretty rare for it to do that, like in comparison to all the rest. And yet, because it has so much room to plot these things, to let you see everything drawn out, that you don't need those times where the characters sort of more spell it out for you in there.
Yeah.
Because it's all there
really
in
interesting.
the motions.
Like how much we are able to draw from their, like, from actions and conversations, that sort of thing. And it's not, we don't get a lot of introspection, but we have a huge, you know, viewing, I guess you could say, of people coming into like themselves.
Yeah. It's interesting if you stop reading Worm for a while, right, and then you read one of the last like arcs of Worm, if you just jump back in after, you know, maybe like 2 years of not, the prose is like so sparse. It's so, because all of the characters and everything have already been described, you know, maybe 3 or 4 times before, and so you're expected to
sort
know,
of have that in the back of your mind.
Yeah, when we like Tattletale is not described at all in the last like 10 arcs, except for maybe, you know, has blonde hair, or if it's really relevant, like purple, you know, eye or whatever. I wonder what the last time her purple eye on her costume is mentioned, and yet for a lot of people that image stays.
It's very like embedded in our mind. And
so when you go and read it, especially in Speck, most of all, although Speck does have a lot more cerebral stuff, everything is vague. If you don't have all the context built up. Even when you do, but especially if you don't. So I just find that really, really interesting. How it feels fully fleshed out when, if you just look at what's on the page, it kind of isn't.
Yeah, it's really interesting that way. I don't know. Yeah, it's a fascinating like way to write a novel, I think. Yeah. And I really like it.
A lot of this would be true of like a lot of novels. Like, I'm sure a Game of Thrones, the final, or A Song of Ice and Fire, the later books don't just like describe Arya's face again, you know, or whatever.
Yeah.
But I think this is not an extreme, but like a closer to an extreme of assuming that you know what you're looking at.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't know. It's very like, it's so specifically specific and also like really, really vast, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It was a really fun journey to like go along with, you know?
Yeah. It like, when I was much younger, like in my preteens, in very early teens, Percy Jackson Olympians was my like number one impactful book series. You know, everyone has a different one. Harry Potter for a lot of people, Twilight for some, and Hunger Games for others, or whatever. And Worm was that for teenage years, and like it's really impactful to me, and it's something I think about all the time. Like, not only when I'm watching superhero stuff. Actually, superhero stuff is probably one of the times I think about it the least where you would expect. But I think about it anytime, you know, I'm reading anything that's like more for young adults.
Yeah.
Of just like, hey, this is how you can execute a story really well. This is how you can stick a landing, and this is how you can get someone to really care about a character. It's actually interesting at this point, like, after rereading it so many times, Taylor is less of a character to me. She's almost like, that's not the right word, but like, I've projected myself a lot onto her, you know, of just like, I've rationalized along with her.
Yeah, of course.
That she's more a perspective than like a distinct, different
person
character. Yeah. Like alongside Rachel or others at this point. Like Rachel or Taylor, the character who was bullied, is someone I can think of almost separate from like Taylor, the perspective, the narrator of Worm.
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes any sense at all, but I'm trying to articulate it.
No, that makes sense. Yeah, that is very interesting. Of like how influential it is in terms of like how you approach a variety of different stories. Yeah, I don't know. There's such a very specific impact of like young adult novels. Yeah. On like individual minds.
Yeah. I mean, it's really weird, especially if Wildbow listens to this particular section. Just the fact that, like, I mean, I've read so many of his works, so many of his words, so many times.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I've read Pact and Twig once each, and a lot of Ward and a lot of Pale. But Worm I've read, at this point, I think this is my fifth time that I've completed reading the whole thing.
Yeah.
And so that's a lot of time for Wildbow's words to echo in my head for this perspective to influence me. And so, like, some not insignificant portion of my entire personality is a result of this book, which is just, it's just very strange to think about. And it also makes me wonder, like, which sections, right?
Yeah, which sections have you, like, returned to?
Or which sections of my personality are...
Oh, I see, yes.
A result. And I don't know.
I feel like I consume like so much that I think like that I return to all the time, and like re-examine and think about again in different ways. I don't know. I feel like the majority of my life has been built on like reading and consumption of media and like filtering life through that. That I feel like, I don't know, I think that's why I'm so fascinated by the concept of language being intensely referential. Because in my mind, when I speak, it's always referential. You know? There's always something that I'm like, oh, this is like that.
Right.
I don't know. I feel like I wouldn't be able to like parse it out and choose, or like pieces of like what you were wondering about, which aspects of yourself have been influenced so greatly by Worm. I feel like I wouldn't be able to like individually separate the strands of myself versus what I've consumed.
It's a drop in water, right? Where maybe it like influences one section a little bit more, but it's everywhere.
Yeah.
Good book. Okay. So we can. There's other sections, and we had some really great listener questions that I do want to go through, as well. So I want to go to the listener questions before we go to like other things that we might want to mention.
Okay.
So I'm very bad at math. Asked a couple questions,
which was so sweet. I really liked all of these questions.
Yeah. They also suggested reading the first part of Ward sooner than later. Basically, Arc 1, or Glowworm, which is the bridge between Worm and Ward, and then like the first arc, I think, or the first chapter even.
Yeah.
Which I don't entirely disagree. So, first question. Could you talk about some characters that you feel either overcame their trigger or trauma, or moved in such a positive direction that it could be thought of as such? How did it happen, and why?
Yes. Well, both the people that you wrote down, if you would like to mention them, because you thought of them first.
The obvious ones, Rachel and Aisha.
Yeah, both of them.
I think Aisha, especially a lot through humor, like her whole thing of being forgotten. She's like acknowledges it and laughs about it a lot. And then in addition, she's, doing the memorializing thing, which I think is also one way that she gets remembered in addition. So
yeah, she sort of like makes herself unforgettable. Yeah. Both of them I think did really well. I think I feel like, I mean, perhaps not at the very end, but like I feel like Regent did really well in his like individual, especially like when he became like linked to Imp. I think he really, like when he became more than just like kind of like a side character, I feel like in the group, I feel like he really kind of came into himself. I feel like Bonesaw in the last moments did fairly okay. I mean, she's still like got a ways to like go.
Yeah,
and she still has like a lot.
A strong start.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like for her, those initial steps were really momentous. I feel like Gollum did.
Yeah,
really
I
well.
mean, his whole thing was never, being significant enough, and all, I think being challenged over and over of like just not being like tough enough.
Yeah,
being too soft. But I think that's part of what makes him such a good person.
Yeah, it's because he chose to like hold on to that piece of himself. Like he saw that there was that Taylor had chosen to like compartmentalize that, and he was unwilling to do that. And I think that really kind of strengthened his character.
I think he's a key example of staying true to yourself when that self is a good person to stay true to.
Yeah. Oh, I feel like Defiant did really well.
Oh yeah, of course.
He was struggling at the beginning, and he really pulled through.
Didn't even know it. Yeah.
Yeah,
he's a good dude.
Yeah. Who else? Perhaps Sveta, and like maybe some of the Case 53s.
Definitely taking steps in the right direction for sure. Yeah.
I mean, they didn't perhaps they didn't fully like get to the actualization aspect of it, but I feel like they definitely like were able to like articulate and begin to like process in ways that they couldn't before because they didn't know.
I wonder if some of them are frustrated with not being able to kill Dr. Mother themselves or face them.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's also like there's a lot of y'all. Like you can't all kill Dr. Mother.
Like so. This isn't Julius Caesar, okay?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. And I feel like with them, it's more about coming to terms with their new self than exacting like revenge. Because the revenge isn't going to give them the catharsis they want.
It's so short-lived.
Yeah.
If y'all have an answer, you should answer.
There's probably a lot that we forgot to mention.
Yes, lots. I mean Taylor too, even.
Oh yeah,
at the very, very end. I think.
Yeah, she sort of reaches the pinnacle at the end.
If you knew what powers were and what the global threat was, would you use a vial? I think. Would you accept a cauldron vial at the end?
No. Because I am not a aggressive person. Except during that game where you turn the table on and it like has air and you play the puck?
Air hockey?
Yeah.
You're very aggressive with that?
Very dangerous. Dangerous. You should not. Or like Uno, those sorts of things, terrible. But I feel like my general personality.
I actually would really, really like to play board games with you, Clarence. We need to make that happen. As soon as possible.
I'm mean. Like I get mean and cruel, and it's not a good time.
Wow. No, I would.
I'm not
I
a
would
good
love to
winner,
see that.
and I'm not a good loser. We banned game night.
Really?
Like,
oh my goodness.
Yeah. And we are not allowed to do that in my house.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it's very unfortunate. But so I feel like it wouldn't go well if I was to join the like physical attack. And I feel like I would be probably better served helping like individual like communities. Also, I fear conflict, so that it wouldn't go well.
I fear verbal conflict, but well, no, conflict in general. But it's more the fact that I don't want to hurt someone than I would say yes, but with with the acknowledgement that it's a bad decision. It is a bad decision, and I would eventually regret it. I would, and I would do it knowing that. Mostly just out of a desperate grasp for meaning. It's really hard to feel special in reality. So if I could pick up some powers and not like have a guaranteed fate worse than death, like if you're gonna send me into battle against Grey Boy, okay, no, I won't take it.
No thanks.
But against Scion, I mean, he just wanted to kill people, right? So, I mean, I want to choose interesting things. I think interesting things are. I wouldn't want to live in a world that was just safe and happy all the time. I don't think. I wouldn't want the human experience to just be flattened out.
Yeah.
That said, I mean, I would love for a lot of the worst suffering to be just cut out entirely. I'm not one of those people that thinks like true evil needs to exist for us to know true good. I just, I'm okay with, for myself anyway, some bad things happening if it keeps things more interesting. Yeah. Next question. What are some things that stood out for you because of your appreciation of art and artists? Special parts of the story that stood out for you?
This question is so nice. I'm thinking, well, I wrote down a bunch of like settings that I was thinking about. Because like the city and like the multiple landscapes in the city. I feel like the view that we get of New York where it's like all these like multi layers of New York. That was so fascinating. Just like visually, and like the sort of like eerie emptiness of like cauldrons, bowels, and like lower levels, and like some of the like visual weight of the costumes and like in the choreography of like the huge fights. I feel like those visuals are really, really interesting. And just like the Endbringers themselves, I feel like they're like the way that they operate and the way that they look is so like intriguing to me. And then all of the like material details that Taylor notices that wouldn't really like change the narrative that much if we didn't notice it, but like definitely alter how I kind of like know of the space and know of the people. Like it changes it minutely.
So what do you mean that. Like where are some of the examples for that?
I just like perhaps like a shift in like someone's like body language or the way that they kind of occupy space, or details about their like appearance that she deems very important to mention, which is me referencing the wire eyelashes that I cannot forget. So fascinating. But like there's a lot of those sorts of details that she mentions in her descriptions that I feel like sort of change the way that we feel about people because of the detail in her. It's like it's the difference between like a charcoal drawing of somebody versus like kind of a gestural charcoal drawing versus like hyper realistic graphite, like there's a level of attentiveness that we get and we kind of, take on because she has it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What
about you?
So for me, those poetic bits too of just description, but also some of just the uncomfortableness of some of the questions asked and fates observed, right? Like Grey Boy and sacrificing for ultimate goods, the end of the universe stuff. All the mind alteration, it's really horrible. Sion's emotions, the screaming, I think was just. It's an affecting image.
Yeah.
Like I feel like if it was a painting, I would feel something looking at it.
Yeah.
And then also
feels like Saturn. Isn't that painting where Saturn is like eating his child or something?
Yeah. The one where he's like ripping.
Yeah, that's sort of like.
Yep.
Something so like deep within, I don't know. It's very like visceral.
Primally
his emotions. Science.
Yeah. Wait, sorry, I missed some of that.
Oh, science emotions are very visceral.
Yeah.
Like this sort of like disturbing with disturbing intensity, I think I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and as another thing, the non-human perspectives and just the different perspectives of viewing the world, not only, the xenofiction of like the Seamerg and others and the entities, but also like just the ways that some powers worked and how they change how we view the world. I just think they're very great. I mean, Matt talks a lot about it in We've Got Worm, but how Worm is great science fiction. And it is science fiction.
It is. It's really. I was very impressed with like the level of detail and like continuous additions to like the world building. Like it's not like we are introduced to the world and we know it, and then we go on and proceed into the story. It's like throughout the entire story, we're still building on our knowledge.
Yeah,
which is the best way to world build.
The mysteries are ongoing, and we even as some knowledge feels complete or more complete, there's still more. Like even now, there's still more now. Even as we know the broader strokes. And the final thing I want to mention is just like how neat so much of the symbolism is. Like just the fact that powers that were worked off of trauma is just so. Yeah, it works so well. It makes it so easy to analyze characters. You're like, oh, what was their trauma? How is it manifesting through their power? How are they still facing it today? It's so neat and other stuff. Yeah.
And I feel like it's a good way to like process.
Right.
If you like identify with an individual.
Yeah.
Because it's so like some of it like feels literalized. That it like, I don't know, I feel like it's easier to confront when it's something tangible.
As a guidebook, and you can differ from it, but yeah. I'm going to skip the next question and come back to it. But Megafire 7 has left a observation, or left two questions. Saying, I think one of the moments in these three arcs that I've always marveled at is the Seamerg stab upgrading Leviathan. This is the last section.
Yeah.
It seems absolutely filled with symbolism that is utterly pointless, and just the Seamerg using the symbolism for shits and giggles, like Leviathan being crucified. I realize that asking about the Seamerg's motives is itself a 4D rabbit hole to go down, but do you have any thoughts about why she behaved the way she did?
I feel like she's got something else planned.
Well, I think so much of it really comes down to what is her motivation? Like, what is the one thing that she's like, now that the cycle is broken, and especially now that the biggest threat is gone, why is she doing the things that she's doing?
Yeah, like,
if she's all ego, all rules, no primal drives, what is she? Does she still have a drive for conflict like so many other parahumans do, or what?
I don't know. Very intriguing. She's a very large question mark to me. Because she does. She seems like everything that she does seems to be purposeful. You know, like it seems to hold some sort of
But to what
motive.
end?
Yeah, like, I don't know. She is like that like a chair, you know? And that's a perpetual motion machine where like it's like 3 steps away from being a chair.
Wait, what?
You know? Okay, so there's this like I don't remember which museum it is. I feel like it's at MIT or something, or somewhere, I don't know, somewhere in like New England, where there's like this perpetual motion machine of a chair that's like always, there's like 4 or 5 or 6 different pieces that are in these different like cycles, right? And then they only meet up together once to become a chair, and then they return into their cycling, and then they return to the chair, and it's like back and forth and back and forth.
Okay,
but
interesting.
And she has like 4 or 5 different things that she does, and it seems like they're all very purposeful. You know, like all of her actions seem like they're setting a course for something, but we don't know what it is, right? So they're all these little pieces, and we know that there is maybe a chair at the end, but we don't know what the chair is.
That's an interesting metaphor.
Does that make sense?
Sort of.
It's just like, I feel like there is a purpose for everything that she does. We just don't know what it is.
Yeah, that's the thing. So that makes it hard to guess at her motivations and why she's doing certain things. But if we want to guess at why she's using the symbolism here, random guesses that I don't think are probably accurate are maybe she's trying to start a religion, maybe encourage the fallen.
Nice.
Or maybe she just like, maybe this just strikes more fear into people to really to call back to those that symbology.
Yeah.
Like, you know, Leviathan, the snake, right? The serpent being crucified is an interesting thing.
Yeah. I don't know. She also exerts power over something that no one else can exert power over, right? So it's like, I feel like she you know, kind of places herself in a different positionality by doing this, one that's like higher than she was, I guess, in terms of like control over others. But I don't know why she would do that, you know. She's very confusing. Not confusing, confounding. I think.
Confounding. That's a good word for that. Yes. Yeah. Also, she sang at the end. She was there at the end, and she sang to everyone.
Did.
And I don't know how
she did.
Does that do?
Tricky.
Yeah. It's a Megafire 7. Megafire 7's other question is, I'm also curious about who you'd say is the most interesting character in the story for you.
Yes. So I wrote down a lot. But then I realized that I kind of like disregarded the few that I really, really liked and thought were really interesting, which are Rachel and Imp, and Shadowstalker. But I feel like of some other people that we don't get quite as much, but are also equally fascinating, are like people like Lung and like Eidolon and Canary. Canary's a really interesting one because she's present before we see her, but like she's always kind of like that one person who like ends up on the elevator with a group of friends, you know? Yeah.
She was the class. The teacher said to break into groups of 4, and there's a group of 3 friends, and then also Canary.
Yeah. Because like that's what happened when she was on her way to the birdcage, is that she witnessed the whole Lung and Bakura thing. Like I feel like she is like a observer in you know, many stages of life. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like she'd be an interesting one to kind of dig into.
Yeah. I'm planning to do Eidolon as my character thing next week, or the week after next. I don't know if I would call him the most interesting. I don't think I can properly answer the question. I don't think I can. I don't think I can pick one, and I don't think I want to pick one.
I feel like Noelle was also really interesting.
I mean, we could just go on and on listing characters.
So many.
All of the Undersiders. Well, I mean, even Clockwalker, even if he's not like the deepest, like the most complicated thing. Yeah. On and on. One character I did wish that we get more of is Blasto, because I love Blasto,
true.
And I love his crass Latino ass.
I miss a chord.
And all his fungoids. Yeah, a chord. Okay, a chord is pretty high up there. It's pretty high up there. Yes. So the last question that I am very bad at math asked before was, would you consider doing the same kind of podcast for Ward? This was so fun to get to vicariously relive the read from your perspective. Parentheses, and thank you. And thank you for listening.
So,
thank you for listening. I'm very bad at math. And thank you for listening, everyone else.
There's such nice notes.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's an aside thing. Yeah, no, really, it's wild that people are that so many people listen to this, and we really appreciate
people get so
your
excited
attention
and like full of discussion and everything, and I don't know.
And we're
it's
so
cool.
long-winded, and yet you still listen.
I know. I'm super impressed every time.
But are we planning? What are we planning next? I think is basically the question, and the answer is we have not completely decided.
Ooh.
So. We do have some plans, and we do want to do. The thing is, we don't want to like commit to anything because we have classes, or I have classes, and Clarence is planning to apply to grad school, right? And it's a lot of stress and things like that. So we're not quite ready to be like
this immediately.
It's not going to be starting off the second that the Decomposing Worm is over. Mm-hmm. But yes, we would like to do another decomposing-esque thing covering another of Wild Ghost works.
Yeah, I think that would be very interesting.
Yeah. Now, whether if it's decomposing Ward or decomposing Pact or Twig or Pale, I don't think we'll do Pale,
probably
but we're not entirely sure yet. Yeah. So please stay tuned. Eventually, if we do something, we'll have an announcement podcast little thing at the end of the podcast feed here. So stay subscribed. Yeah.
And I feel like that the sort of waltzy song that's perhaps is a perfect. Oh, I think it's Doris Day. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so we'll be doing something for sure. I'm sorry for not committing, but that's. I think one thing we've learned over the course of this show is for us to not commit to things like release dates and such. We'll probably do something different next time because it's just deadlines are not good for me.
We're really more like Jell-O instead of stone.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, see, just to reveal some of the issue, the problem always is that, we could do a like pre-recorded thing and record the episodes ahead of time, and then it would be fine because we would record them on our own schedule and then release them according to a schedule, and it would be fine. However, because we would like to answer listener questions and be live in that sense, we kind of can't do that. So that's the problem there. So I mean, there's some solutions possible. Also, just like biting the bullet and trying to be more on time is also possible. But that's our conundrum. Yeah.
And what a conundrum it is.
Do we want to mention anything about Worm right now? Honestly, we've been talking for a very long time.
We have. We've been talking
I'm a little tired.
I feel like we can hold on to some of these things if we want to bring them up next time.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah. Some of the things I wanted to talk about were just like favorite story arcs and character arcs, and just draw out some themes. And I think that can all be done in the Perspectives episode. So I think we're going to end this now. And thank you so much for listening to this episode of an overview.
Thanks for sticking with us till the end.
So, if you're interested in what we're doing here at Doof Media, here are some of the things that are going on. Did you know that the 100 episode anniversary of the Doofcast is next week, next Friday? It's wonderful. Oh my goodness. 100th episode. It's a great show. I love it so much. And so I highly recommend that people look forward to that episode. I think it'll be a little bit special. And some other Doof members might be involved in one way or another, and I'm very much looking forward to it. And related, is it next week or is it the week after? I don't remember. The Doof and Chill. Yeah.
I think it's
next week. I think is it the 26th?
It is. I know the numbers. I just don't know the days.
Yes. Yeah, it's the 26th. It's a Saturday. So next so that Doofcast is next Friday, and next Saturday is a Doof and Chill. It's we're going to be playing Among Us, and I'm very, very excited for it. So all 7 of us, if schedules hold, we'll be participating in that. And if you all don't know, Among Us is a game where you are all crew members on the ship, tasked with keeping the ship going, but one of you is a murderer, and you have to find out who the murderer is.
It's very Agatha Christie.
Yes, there's been a bunch of different games with this permutation. I think this is specifically a spin-off, not spin-off, but inspired by a game called Station 13, which is wild. Don't play it, just read the stories about it. It's wonderful and very weird. But also like Town of Salem and Werewolf and all of those as well. So I'm very much looking forward to that. So
yes, come join us.
Finally, yes. It'll be Saturday the 26th. I think 9:30 Central Standard Time, and that it's only for $5 patrons and above. So consider donating at that level.
Yes. Patreon dollars are, I feel like they sort of open up the ceiling for like a variety of cool extra bits. So if you want, you can consider donating like the $5, a single dollar, whatever else you can afford. It's very much they provide the ability to continue to create a lot of these things. So
that's right. And if we do, if and when we do another show, funding for our intro music, a logo, anything like that, that's all going to be coming from patron dollars. And so we really appreciate y'all, and that helps us actually have some quality things, not to mention the ongoing costs. Yeah. So we really appreciate it. And of course, if you don't have money for Patreon, we completely understand. But there are plenty of other ways to help us out. You can tell someone about Worm, and you can drop a worm into the back of their shirt.
Oh,
and they'll be like, what is that? And then you're like, oh, it's a worm. And then hold out your phone in front of them, and then they will read it, and they will understand what a worm is, and that it's a fourth dimensional entity that is being a parasite to all of us.
That sounds terrifying.
That's Worm, folks. You can also tell other Worm fans about this podcast, or tell your professors about this, and tell them about how you can do some analysis this way, and maybe point them in the direction we've got Worm too. And the last way, of course, to help us out is if you leave us a rating and review on iTunes or whatever your podcasting app is. We really appreciate that, and it helps the algorithm recognize that we exist.
Tell us what you think. Speak us into existence.
That's an interesting... I like that.
You're welcome.
So you can reach us on Twitter, which is at Decomposing Pod. That's where you'll find out about how episodes are always late. And also, if and when we make another show, that's where you would find out about it. You can email us at decomposingpodcast@gmail.com. I just realized if we change the name, the verb, then I don't want to change the email. We'll probably keep it the same. It'll be fine.
It'll be fine.
And of course, you can find us in our Reddit threads. And on Discord, too. If you want to at me, you can. Just be chill about it. And also, if it's not 2020 anymore, don't listen to this message telling you to at me. Like see for
is the verbiage going to change?
More recent. Well, just in case I don't know, maybe we blow up, and I don't want to get added by thousands of people.
That's terrible.
What's terrible?
Oh! I thought you meant in recognition. I see. Okay, never mind. I
meant added now. like adding me in Discord so I get a notification.
Oh, yes. No, I understood that part. I thought you meant blowing up in terms of like death. But now I see now.
No. Clarence, no. Okay, so please comment in the discussion thread. So actually on that, I want to issue everyone listening a challenge. That means you, that you're listening. If you think, hey, he can't be talking to me, that's so specific. I'm talking to you. I have a challenge for you. I would like you to write essay about Worm. Now, it doesn't have to be a full, real essay. Do whatever amount is comfortable for you. Even a paragraph. A paragraph is wonderful. But, you know, look at a character, look at a theme, look at just anything that, you know, when you read Worm, like, stuck out to you and that you remember and maybe you've thought about more than once. And try to articulate either how it works or what it makes you feel or what you can learn from it. If you want, you can apply literary theory, but don't worry about it. You could even do it about like an individual's powers or about the trauma, anything. And don't worry about like, you know, if you end up echoing a sentiment already talked about, that's still great.
Yeah, you're writing and like thinking. And I feel like even just like the act of writing can kind of like bring you into like a purpose that you didn't even know you like had. You know, there's something about the act that sort of like brings you to a conclusion, even if it's just like a stream of consciousness piece or just like, you know, kind of you sitting and thinking through things. Like there's I don't know, there's something that can really, you know, get your brain working, I think. Yeah. In the act of writing.
And I really love to hear what y'all come up with. So yes, please in our discussion thread for this episode, give us an essay about Worm.
Share with us your thoughts.
So this is our last. Okay. So in 2 weeks, on October 2nd, is our last episode of Decomposing Worm, which is it's weird to actually complete something.
So strange.
Weird. Of course, we'll still be kicking around and doing stuff in a Doof network, but so we'll see y'all in 2 weeks with the Perspectives episode for the final book of Worm.
Very exciting. Shall be forthcoming, I suppose.
What do you have here in the parentheses?
Oh yes. Well, I had this whole plan about, you know, being very excited about writing about Worm now that I have like the full picture, because there's been topics that I've like been kind of, you know, sort of chewing on. Like a cow. That I really want to talk about in terms of like the like presence of like friendship, you know, and like the power of friendship, which sounds very like after school especially, but like it's wonderful.
But and then also, it is significant.
The sort of the like violence that's sort of like inherent in some words that like Kenneth Burke talks about. I feel like that could apply really well here.
It's actually it's almost like a little unfair for us to like with this final episode, now that we've unlocked being able to talk about all of Worm, that now we're done and so we can't talk about all of Worm. So you know, there's a part of me that's like I want to keep doing Perspectives episodes, but also like I'm real tired. Yeah, I mean, maybe at one point we'll do another extra episode bonus.
Very interesting.
See y'all in 2 weeks.